All right, thank you, Eve. We're going to go ahead and call our first joint committee of the Joint Transportation Highways Military Affairs Committee to order. And before we hop on with anything else, can I go ahead and get roll call, please?
This for the Joint Transportation Highways and Military Affairs Committee for Monday, May 4th. Senator Anderson. Senator Barlow.
Excused.
Senator Cooper.
Here.
Senator Kolb.
I saw him. He's here. Yeah, we'll count him as here. I did see him, so.
Representative Filer. Representative Geringer. Representative Larson. Representative McCann. Representative Nicholas. Representative Posey. Representative Tarver.
Excused.
Representative Wiley. Co-Chairman Pappas.
Here.
Chairman Brown.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Eve. Mr. Chairman, I'll open up any remarks you might have before we head on.
I'm good.
All good. Okay. Committee. Not sure if any of you have seen the forecast for what we have headed south for our LSO staff, probably a good chunk of our YDOT group, anybody else that may be heading home today and tomorrow. Pretty good and significant weather storm focusing in on the Cheyenne area. It's really not going to impact anybody else across the state except those along I-80. So we are going to work fast and furious, not only today, but tomorrow as well, to attempt to try to get out of these meetings a little earlier than anticipated. With that, there are a few areas on the agenda that I would like to call attention to for not only the committee's attention, but also those that are in attendance and those that may be watching online. The first one is at 11 o'clock, we have the WACERS report from the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. They asked to get the county engineers and road superintendents on the agenda. What I will tell you, committee, is that is going to be for informational purposes only. There will be no questions asked during that report. That report will be given to us. If you have questions, I will ask you to work with those individuals offline. We are going to receive that information, and then we will eventually probably just break for lunch right after that. So the other thing that we do have on the agenda that was added a little late was some information on the Wyoming Highway Patrol. That was also asked in a late request from the Chiefs of Police and Sheriff's Association on some of the information that you may have already seen in the news. So we will probably spend a little bit of time on that, but I would like to keep that again in an offline conversation if you can with the director / administrator / colonel and any other hats that he might be wearing at this point. So with that, we will roll right in. If we have nothing else from the chairman, co-chairman, we're good?
We're good.
All right. With that, we have our opening remarks from the Department of Transportation. So, Director. We're already ahead of schedule, but don't worry. I will find a way to take us off that and we'll get way behind here eventually. Director, if you would, please introduce yourself for the record. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman, members of the committee. Darren Westby, Director of Wyoming Department of Transportation / Administrator of the Highway Patrol. Glad to be here with you today. We have several members of the YDOT team behind me, the Brain Trust, that can help me if there's any questions that I may not be able to answer, but and they'll have some that they'll be presenting on down the road. Seems like just yesterday that we were all together partying down in the connector, and it actually was just about a month and a half ago. So not sure that I have a whole lot to update you on, but really we're shifting gears out of what I would call the mediocre winter, just in time for us to gear back up. You know, if you traveled here, obviously you went through a lot of construction zones. So we're definitely high gear into the construction season. But now we're putting the plows back on, getting ready to battle this storm, and may the 4th be with you. Getting home. So right after the session, Mr. Chairman, we had the opportunity to go around the state and talk to all of our staff. We do town halls. I try to do 2 a year just to keep them informed. I do one right after the legislative session and one right before the winter season hits, just to disseminate as much information as we can. in the springtime, it's obviously more, cheerleading, trying to make sure that we're building morale, make sure we're recognizing people appropriately, and then keeping them informed as to the successes of the legislative session. Really, the big push we continue on is the impact of our industry to the state of Wyoming and to the country. I want to ensure that every one of we have 2,051 FTEs, but we're sitting around 1,850 right now, filled positions. So we're sitting about 12% vacant, which is better than what it was 3 years ago. But still trying to build that morale. And the one way that we're doing it is ensuring that everybody that works for WYDOT understands the significance of their role and the bigger impact of the state of Wyoming. And so we talked a lot about the session, as I said, and the successes. Obviously the hot topic for all those 1,800 plus people that I talked to a couple weeks ago was the market adjustments. And obviously very excited to see where that went. But the hot topic that I want to bring back to you is they kept asking, how do we make this standard? How do we make a market adjustment standard? And so I promised them that I'd be working with the governor's office and with the legislative body and the budget department and A&I to see what it's going to take to make that a standard adjustment every biennium budget discussion. I don't want it to be a fight every time. I don't want it to be a battle. I shouldn't say fight, a battle every time. I want to make sure that we're working towards standardizing that. We talked a lot about what we're going to be talking about this year, or this interim study. Obviously funding. We'll be talking that until we get some things resolved. But also, they were really pleased to hear work zone safety was another topic that you all decided to bring forward. Very appreciative of that. Not just the contractors that work within our work zones, but everybody that works on the side of the road or in the road that are state employees, that they're workers too, and the work zone safety is important to them. And so they were appreciative of those topics. The last thing I really worked with them on was the employee satisfaction survey. Every 2 years, we do a survey of satisfaction with our employees. Every opposite year, we do a survey of satisfaction on our the general public that uses our roads. And this year was the employee satisfaction. And one thing I can say is we're improving on every category. Not one category went down, which is a good thing. All categories are trending in a positive direction. Not nearly where I would like them to be, but definitely trending in the right direction. The one kind of the litmus test question that I keep pulling out every year just to gauge where we're at is would I recommend WYDOT as a good place to work? When we started, the number was 44%, which was dismal. 2 years later, it was 55%, so trending in a good direction, not where it should be. This last year, I can't say I'm proud, but definitely proud that it's still going in a good direction. We were at 62%. So we're well over half of the people that work for us would recommend us, but I'd love to have that number up in the high 80s, low 90s to ensure that we're recruiting the best from within. And so I guess I say that just because I want to make sure you all know that we are working hard to build that morale and the respect and appreciation for working for our agency and working for the state of Wyoming and how impactful it is for us to be successful with that. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, the colonel left right after the session. Shortly thereafter, our Chief Technology Officer, Nate Smolinski, left as well. So our Deputy Director has taken on the role of Interim Chief Technology Officer. And so we're all wearing a few hats these days. And like you said, I'm the acting administrator of the Highway Patrol. I did that several reasons. I felt the gap in my role of knowledge of the Highway Patrol and going to use this interim 6 months of learning the Highway Patrol a little bit better, taking a deeper dive into their operations to ensure that I'll be the one selecting the colonel. And so how better to know who I should select than to do the job for a few months. And so, and it'll save us a few dollars. So, which is an issue, as you mentioned. Funding, I'll just shift gears because I know we're short on time, but right now from the federal side, we're running, we're running a stateside funding conversation, but we're also running a federal. The reauthorization of the big transportation bill is going on right now. Hopefully they'll be hitting that on the floor of the House here in the next couple weeks, and we'll be heavy into the reauthorization conversation. Biggest concern there is that what we're hearing is we're not fully optimistic that we're going to see any increase from the federal transportation bill, which even if we stay flat, it's with the buying power, we're going backwards a little bit. So strengthens the same need of the conversation that we've had here several times as to why shoring up that stateside revenue piece is even that much more important. So appreciate those conversations as we go into the rest of the summer. Mr. Chairman, really appreciate your guys' efforts on the revenue streams. We've shifted internally on the design side. As we've talked for the last 15 years, we've pretty much tabled any projects that would have expanded capacity, passing lanes, parking areas. We've tabled some larger projects just because we knew we didn't necessarily have the funding to go forward with them. However, it stifled some of the conversations at this table to ensure that you guys could sell that on the floor as well. So we've shifted a little bit internally. Some of our designers now are working on shelf-ready projects that we know we want to do. And the trip report that you'll be seeing here a little bit later, we'll be talking about some of those projects that we've kind of pushed off to the side. Some of those projects are coming forward in design so we can have things ready to go. If funding comes available, we can put them on the street as quick as possible. And so with that, with our funding streams, I think I've talked to you guys also as a priority rating model. We have to really dive deep into what projects we're spending the money on, where we're spending it, and when we're spending it. And part of that is really developing that model to ensure that things that should be rising to the top are rising to the top of that list. And so really proud of the team shifting a little bit of their efforts, not to say that we aren't continuing our efforts to maintain what we have. I mean, it would be a shame to not allow some at least general preservation projects to go forward on some of the lower traveled roads. But at the end of the day, when you're out of money, you're out of money, and you have to make those hard decisions. And so, Mr. Chairman, that was a whirlwind update of where we're at. And I didn't know if you wanted to go into the highway patrol now or if you wanted me to go into that when we were talking in the funding side of the house.
We'll take that, Mr. Director. We'll take that once we get down there on the topic on the agenda, because I want to make sure we give the trip presentation its due diligence as well as we're going through this. So committee, any questions? Yes, Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, a quick comment first. I'm glad to see your satisfaction rating is going up. That's kudos to you and your team and the entire department to make it a place that people want to work again. I shouldn't say that. Should phrase that a little bit differently, but a good place to work. Wanted to ask real quick too, you talked about funding. What is our current deficit in amount needed for prioritizing these projects?
Mr. Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I got the unfunded needs study that was done back in 2019. We've been over the last year, I've had our team working on dusting that off and reevaluating some of those numbers to ensure that we have the most up to date. The last draft I saw was in the $500 million a year range. And that's about probably 300 million on the road side of the house or the engineering side of the house. The other 200+ million is on the rest of the agency and the operations and all the other programs that we have within aeronautics and communications and just general administration.
Out of curiosity, the draft that you saw, does that include the anticipatory inflow coming in this year of the vehicle sales tax that you guys are expected to see?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to,
I don't see your CFO here, so that's not a huge issue if you don't have that, but just out of curiosity.
it's a good question. And right when you said it, I was asking myself the same question, but I can't remember when I glanced at it on Friday.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll identify myself. I'm Brian Olson. I'm the engineering, Assistant Chief Engineer of Engineering and Planning for YDOT. So the number that the director mentioned, 300 million, that would take into account the vehicle sales tax. The draft number right now is roughly 370 million on the surface transportation side. So if you take off the, say, 62 million, we're right at about 300 million.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian, maybe just don't run away too quickly. This might be in your wheelhouse. Is later in that trip report, it talked about the IIJA funding that comes into play there. I wasn't quite clear how that IIJA funding is accounted for in our annual revenue. So do we take that into account, and when that's going to increase the deficit? Or is that kind of a one-time funding option that we've just been able to take into account? I'm just trying to understand the structure, the impact of that 1.8 in there somehow.
Director or Mr. Olson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, generally speaking, so the IJA funding is included in our anticipated federal revenue. At this point, we're really unsure what the new highway bill will look like. So we're sort of assuming levels at where they are or maybe a little bit lower. So that's kind of what we anticipate for revenue. And Rodney would probably be better able to speak to that, our budget.
I think.
Follow up?
Yeah, follow up. Yeah.
So I'm going to try and say that so I can understand it a little bit. So we've got our federal, just the highway bill funding that we kind of pencil out there. Then we receive this enhancement through the IIJA. We take advantage of that, but when it goes away, our highway funding bill it certainly isn't going to account for that. Was never intended to, but does that create a bigger deficit then on the annual?
I think I got it. Mr. Chairman, I think it's a great opportunity to be really clear here. The IIJA is the formula.
Oh.
Part of the IIJA is some of the discretionary grants that we've been applied for and been successful to receive. So within the IIJA, the big transportation bill has the formula included in it. And so that's what we utilize to project out our STIP into the future.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director and to your colleague. So you told us what the deficit is, but what is the annual spending we're doing right now? What percentage is the 500 million of what we're actually doing? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, our overall YDOT budget is right around $900 million a year. Construction, right around 400. So roughly the construction side of the house is about half of that.
Okay. Committee, any further questions for Mr. Olson and/or the director before we hop into our next item? I think we'll probably dive into that a little bit deeper, but as we get into this trip presentation. But okay, seeing none, we will take. We're not going to take any public testimony on that, just because that was opening remarks. That does take us to our trip presentation. We've got Mr. Moretti. with, also, I believe Kelly was going to be presenting this. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, we're working on getting Mr. Moretti online right now. We're having a few technical issues at the
Okay.
moment.
Well, with that, let's take our first break of the day. Just kidding. Just kidding, folks. What I do want to do is, I don't want to get us behind. Are we just having troubles getting him on Zoom? Is that the major issue? Representative Larson.
So on this trip from, trip report, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure that I fully understand behind that. So is this a nonprofit? As I read who this is this just a nonprofit entity that does this for each state? Do we contract with them? I'm just trying to understand if we solicit this report or if they just come and say, here it is out of the goodness and you should use it as information.
So if I had Miss Little in the room, Miss Little with the Contractors Association actually solicited this and actually hired this group to come out and do this report for the Contractors Association to provide, we'll call it an unbiased view of surface transportation issues across the state and what the construction needs look like. So this was done in consultation with the Contractors Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd certainly like to hear more about that because I did some research on TRIP and I was left with the same questions. Who are they? Who was in contact with them? But more importantly, it looks like they took the STIP from the state of Wyoming and just incorporated it. So I'd like to know just how these projects actually came to be and how they got prioritized by TRIP. Thank you.
Okay. Miss Little, yeah, you just got, you're walking into the lion's den as it already turns out. So a little bit as you're coming on up, we've called you ahead. Sorry about that. It's very rare that a legislative committee is headed ahead of schedule. Yes. So Miss Little, a couple of the questions that have come up just as we're getting ready to go through this process. Number one, the solicitation of TRIP, the company, to come out and give us this information. And then the other discussion was how did they come about the projects that they selected, the discussion, maybe a little bit of that information. My suspicion is you may not have that information, but you may also be the person that gets to answer as best you can if we cannot get Mr. Moretti on Zoom. So
I've asked to have him called too, so we're working on the back end. So sorry, Mr. Chairman. Whew, members of the committee, my name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. And to answer your question, first about just how this report, the genesis of this report came about. As you're aware from the materials received, TRIP is a nonprofit research firm out of Washington, D.C. And they actually travel to a lot of the same conferences and groups and meetings that state transportation departments, contractor associations, other people who work on our road system and work on improving our road system, that they attend. Us at AGC of Wyoming actually had met with TRIP, and they always do a one-page, every year they do a one-page kind of brief synopsis for every state. And so our discussion with them was, is there a way for them to help us get more in-depth, have a more in-depth report? We've seen them do that for other states. They do it for a lot of states, and we wanted the same kind of report for Wyoming. So that's where this report came from. We asked them to work with WYDOT and to work with other, other places where they could receive data about our road system to put the report together. And so it was really just a request. This is something that they do. And as a nonprofit, it's very, very nice of them to take an interest in Wyoming and to have this information put together for the legislature and the public at large to understand the difficulties that we are facing here in Wyoming with road funding, road safety, and the like. As to your other question about remind me again, Mr. Chairman. The second question was.
The second question was, how did they come up with the determination of the projects that were in here? The question, and ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Kolb, was, looks like we took the STIP, grabbed the STIP, and then just kind of incorporated the STIP into their report, and not a lot of forethought beyond that. If there was some discussion as to what projects and why these particular projects were chosen.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think you're correct that they do look at what is upcoming for state departments of transportation, what they're wanting to do in the future. However, I think they also take into account other data, including road surface data. They look at federal information that they have, particularly on the interstate highway system that comes out of the federal governments and the Department of Transportation on the federal level. So I don't think it was necessarily them just taking the STIP, but I think that the information they looked at is a lot of the same information YDOT looks at when they create the STIP. So that's where the melding of those two come together is that's two different areas where they're pointing in the same direction.
And before we hop over to the question, I'm going to check and see, do we have Mr.
Shoot.
Is it Moretti? Is that right?
Mr.
Yes,
Moretti, yeah.
who is not more ready at this point. We do not have him. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do our best. Please keep in mind
No, sorry.
that Ms. Little is not the author of the report committee. However, they did commit in this, so she will do her best to answer this. Director, I'll give you a chance to take a bite at the apple here in a second. Senator Kolb, did you want to follow up on your question before we move on?
Mr. Chairman, he is now online.
Got him. All right. He is more ready. Mr. Moretti, welcome to the Joint Transportation Highways Military Affairs Committee. If you would please introduce yourself, and we are just getting started into your report.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I apologize that I understand you guys are moving a little quicker than you had thought. So my name is Rocky Moretti. I'm the Director of Policy and Research with TRIP. TRIP is a nonprofit organization based in Washington, D.C. We've been putting out reports for the last 60 years now, or last about 55 actually, excuse me, looking at the condition of the nation's transportation system. But most of our reports are at the state level. In fact, this year, the Wyoming report was our 8th state report of the year. And this month we'll be putting out reports in Montana and also California. And we have 6 or 7 more reports coming out this year. TRIP is an organization, we're not a lobbying organization, although we're supported by a coalition of transportation organizations from labor to manufacturing to construction. We just put out the report looking at the condition of the system. We don't, excuse me, we don't attempt to suggest how some of these challenges should be addressed. So the report that we put out last month really took a look at where things stand in Wyoming in terms of its transportation system. And TRIP has done a number of reports in Wyoming over the last 20 years, looking at conditions and also safety on the state system. So let me go ahead and I think hit the highlights of the report, and then and also I think I'll give a little bit of a broader overview of what we're seeing happening nationally as it impacts Wyoming, and then I'm open for questions. The key finding of the report, and I remember probably just over a decade ago putting out several reports under I believe the director then was John Cox, where there was really some significant funding challenges coming in Wyoming, and I believe subsequently the legislature put forward with some funding package in the state. So this was really coming back a number of years later, and really what the report found that the reality is that obviously the additional funding was very helpful. Also, the 2021 Federal Surface Transportation Bill provided a significant boost in federal funding coming into Wyoming. And that's absolutely critical in Wyoming. As I'm sure you're well aware, the state traditionally has been very reliant, to be honest, more reliant than most states on its federal surface transportation funding. And so this additional state funding and certainly the additional federal funding was critical for the program. But what we've seen in the last several years is across the country, and I'm certainly sure it's true in Wyoming, a significant increase in inflation. The Federal Highway Administration quarterly looks at the cost of labor and materials as it relates to highway construction. And they have found since the beginning of 2022, there's been a 52% increase in congestion. So obviously that has a significant impact, and we're seeing that across the country on state transportation departments' ability to proceed with needed projects. As we point out in the report, if you take a look at the condition of key metrics, in terms of state maintained roadways, which are the state's interstates and its other major highways, the Wyoming Department of Transportation finds that 33% of pavements are in poor condition. And looking at their current level of funding, by 2028, they see that deteriorating to 37% of their major roadways with pavements in poor condition. Obviously, quite an alarm within the state in terms of their ability to preserve the system adequately. We also took a look at bridge conditions across the state. Now, these numbers are for state and locally maintained. And there we found that 7% of the state's bridges are in poor condition and 64% are in fair condition. Obviously, if a bridge is in poor condition, if it's still open, it's because the inspections have shown that they're still safe to carry traffic. But oftentimes a bridge in poor condition needs to be restricted to lighter weight vehicles, which obviously has huge implications economically for emergency vehicles. Obviously, you don't want bridges, being restricted to lighter weight vehicles. And 64% of the state's bridges are in fair condition. These are bridges that the state transportation department or local agencies are doing as best they can to prolong the lifespan of those bridges and keep them from falling into poor condition. And ongoing maintenance can extend the life of those bridges. But as a recent Transportation Research Board concluded, looking at the interstate system, but really this really goes for all of infrastructure, what they're finding with the nation's aging highways and bridges is that as they get into their 50th and 60th year of service, you reach a point of diminishing returns where routine maintenance that might have got you 6 or 7 more years of service now maybe only get you 4 or 5 years, because as you're dealing with increasingly problems in a pavement substructure or with a bridge dealing with some of the superstructure issues, at some point you need either to reconstruct or replace some of these facilities. And that's the box that we see states getting into, is without adequate resources. If they fall behind, it becomes increasingly expensive to catch up because, again, low cost maintenance, you sometimes have facilities that are really beyond that. The Department of Transportation, in answer to our survey, noted that they have annually $125 million funding gap in the work they know they need to do on their bridges. And so they estimate that currently 80 of their bridges are in poor condition, but by 2028, so in only 2 years, that number is going to increase to 123. So that's a staggering increase in bridges in poor condition, and bridges in good condition are going to drop from 534 to 357. We also, TRIP puts a tremendous emphasis, as anyone in the transportation world does, on traffic safety. And we point out in the report that over the last 5 years, there's been an average 128 people killed annually in traffic crashes in Wyoming. We emphasize the word crashes. The word accident implies that that's just something that happens and it's just the price we pay for mobility. But the reality is we don't buy that. And certainly the U.S. Department of Transportation has done really, I think, groundbreaking work to create what they're calling the safe system approach, which is a broad approach that touches all the elements of the traffic safety crisis, really, that the country's facing. And part of that obviously starts with drivers driving at safe speeds, not being impaired. It also involves post-care crash. The better and quicker people get high-level trauma service, the significant impact on survivability. But then the key component, from our perspective, is looking at making our transportation system safer. And states that invest in really cost-effective safety improvements, from cable barriers to adding rumble strips to adding turn lanes at intersections where they're appropriate, improving lane markings, all of these have a significant impact on safety. And we point out in the report that certainly the Department of Transportation, the State Department of Transportation, but also local transportation agencies can certainly do more to improve safety for people driving on Wyoming's transportation system, but obviously it takes the resources to make those investments. In the report, we point out that annually $61 billion of goods are being shipped to and from Wyoming. Certainly the state's energy sector and agriculture sectors are absolutely reliant on a good transportation system. And we point out in the report that when you look at the value of freight shipped just by trucks in and out of the state, adjusting for inflation, by 2050, that's going to increase by 92%, and by weight by 73%. These trucks are obviously vital to the health of the state's economy, but conversely, they're also putting a lot more pressure or wear and tear on the state's roads and bridges. And so this is again, increases the cost of maintaining the system, but the system is vital to the state's transportation system and to the state's economy. We asked the department, from their perspective, to give us information on the 25 most needed transportation improvements across the state, and also let us know where they stood on the funding of those projects. And what really stood out was the Transportation Department had a very good handle on the projects that are absolutely vital to support the state's economy, to support a high quality of life, really to modernize the system as is going to be required for Wyoming to move in the direction it would like, again, as a state economically, and again, in terms of providing a system that's safe and reliable. So let's take a look really quickly at some of these top systems or top improvements. The top one is an interchange for I-80 and I-25 in the Cheyenne area. Obviously, having huge impacts in terms of the local economy. Will also have safety improvements. And again, other than I think projects 7 through 9, the top 6 projects in the state currently do not have construction funding available. We also widening US 287 from Laramie to the Colorado state line is a critically needed project for economic and safety reasons. And then really throughout, a 200-mile stretch of I-80, the state has identified a number of improvements that are needed, including truck climbing zones, additional truck parking, and a variety of other improvements to make the system safer. And again, these projects are unfunded, along with, as we pointed in the report, passing lanes along Wyoming Route 59, widening the Wind River Canyon tunnels in Hot Springs County, and a number of other critical projects that we list in the report. And so if you take a look at those, again, when we did this news conference several weeks ago, Director Westby also spoke, and I think he was quite candid in the department is doing a good job with the resources it has available, but ultimately within the state, through its legislative bodies, the state will need to determine how it wants to move forward. TRIP has done a number of reports this year. We tend to think that why this is happening, or why we're being asked to do a number of reports, is clearly the high level of inflation, unfortunately, has really mitigated the benefits of the 2021 federal surface transportation bill. And so states are really being challenged to look at their transportation system and the needs and determine how they can move forward in terms of providing the resources that are necessary to get the work done. And so we're seeing similar themes in a lot of these reports where states are grappling with their ability to move forward with a significant number of critically needed projects. And as the report also is pointing out, when those improvements are not made, those costs fall on the public, starting with additional operating costs driving on pavements that are in poor condition, lost time due to reliability, and then finally, economically, I mean, the real cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes are obviously human costs that are really almost incalculable. But just looking at the economic cost of these significant crashes, we really get a sense of just how critical they are. So there are real consequences to not being able to move forward with those improvements. I think TRIP also is about to be releasing a report on the nation's interstate system, and the report's going to find that what states are grappling with is the system is the backbone of their economy, but increasingly the system is reaching an age where it's going to need significant reconstruction, and few states really are in a position to move forward with that reconstruction. And then at the federal level, the Federal Surface Transportation Program expires in September. We're all waiting to see if Congress can go ahead and reauthorize that by that deadline, or if they may extend it as they have in numerous previous reauthorization cycles. My sense is that the funding levels are most likely to be similar to what we've seen, essentially status quo. Certainly, there's always hope Congress may find additional funding. But again, I also think that's one of the reasons that so many of the states where TRIP is operating are facing significant challenges, because unfortunately, the likelihood of a significant boost in federal funding is not very good. And so it's really falling back to state houses to sort out how to move forward. So I'm going to stop there. That's a brief overview of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Moretti. Appreciate you joining us. And we do apologize. Again, it's very rare that a legislative meeting with the state of Wyoming is moving at an accelerated rate. So my apologies for that. But I do have a few questions here on the dais. So I'm going to start with Representative Geringer, and then we'll go to Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Mr. Moretti, for the presentation. A couple of questions for you. One is we've heard in this committee that perhaps Wyoming roads are better than some of the surrounding states. Do you have an idea, really, kind of with your perspective, looking at this on a nationwide basis? How does Wyoming compare in terms of overall condition and maybe also unmet funding needs? We heard earlier before you were on that we're facing about a $500 million shortfall in unmet funding needs. Can you speak to that a little bit in looking at the national perspective?
Mr. Moretti, please.
Certainly. At the national level, the data that's available is what's called a roughness index. And essentially that is a monitor that is driven over all of the major roadways across the country. And when you go strictly by the roughness index, which really isn't an engineering measure, yes, we do see Wyoming with pavements that are being judged being smoother than the national average. When we point out in the report that 33% of state maintained roadways are in poor condition, that's more from an engineering perspective. And that's essentially a state cataloging their system in terms of a more in-depth analysis. You know, what's the condition of the sub bases? You know, they're really projecting the lifespan of those pavements moving forward. And in reality, you know, and we recognize that for a transportation agency that's actually looking at their long-term needs, that more significant analysis is useful. But in terms of national comparisons, obviously we're constrained by what data is available. And then in terms of bridge conditions, the state with 7% of its bridges in poor condition is in real, and that's the same as the national rate, which is 7% in poor condition. And so, you know, if you look at those measures, now we also take a look at what we call additional vehicle operating cost. And essentially that's estimating the average motorist, the worse shaped roads are in, the more your vehicle gets beat up, and there's an economic consequence to that. And we estimate to a Wyoming motorist, that's around $400 annually. Again, that's somewhat below the national average, again, just based on a roughness index.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moretti. Senator Kolb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good day, Mr. Moretti. I've got a question about just the metrics you use, methodology.
Sure.
For ranking, frankly, the I-80 25 interchange, on why that's number one. How did you come up with that? And then the other part of this is how do you justify the cost and the safety that could be enhanced in the rest of the state of Wyoming, as opposed to this very large and massive project? What are the justifications for saying it's number one when you consider safety and the money is limited? We obviously don't have enough money to do all these projects. So just how'd you come up with this? I'd like to, I guess, hear your metrics. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Moretti.
Sure. Certainly, you know, the core issues we're looking at are economic impact. We also look at routes in terms of you know, their average daily traffic, how much freight is moving on that, and then certainly a safety metric. And we don't want to you know, oversell the ranking. You know, certainly we're trying to reach the public through the media, and that sort of helps them focus on it. But we recognize that ultimately within the state, it's more appropriate based on benefits and costs to start to determine, you know, from the state's perspective, you know, how these projects fit in terms of any sort of you know, long-term plan, how they move forward. So, but again, we do look at the economic impacts, you know, the number of people using the system and the safety of it. But totally recognize that ultimately it's really within the state where those priorities have to be determined.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, you know, on the face of it, when I look at this report, this looks just like the YDOT report. And it looks like it was compiled from that. So I guess I'm a little confused on the separation between you and YDOT and
Sure.
say with the Contractors Association, because I don't see any differences here. Could you tell me, I guess, how differently you look at it than say Wyoming's YDOT group would look at these projects? Thank you,
Moretti?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, certainly, Senator. When we do a report, we send a survey to the Department of Transportation, and you know, we ask them a number of questions. What's the condition of your system? How do you what do you anticipate the condition will be over the next several years based on your current level of funding? And then in a number of our reports, we'll say what are some of the most critically needed projects that you think need to occur, and what's their funding status? So TRIP did not come into the state and evaluate a number of projects. We survey the department, and you know, assuming, and it's true in any state, that they're doing a variety of planning work. So yeah, so if you see similarities, I mean, ultimately, the source of a lot of this data is the department.
Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two separate questions, if I may. And Mr. Moretti, thank you. My first question is just a little clarification that I didn't understand on your first page under transportation funding in Wyoming on number 3, the I-80 improvements. And as I read this, I understand that there are projects, some of which may be construction. And it's hard to differentiate in there, maybe construction and maintenance. And then on that I-80, that last sentence, well, the whole thing talks about improvements along 200 miles of I-80. Then we throw in this part that says, and would allow for additional maintenance, personnel, and equipment. So we're adding FTEs and equipment into there. And I'm trying to connect the two. Can you, or delineate what it is that we're saying there? Is that part of the construction? Can you clean that up for me, please?
Mr. Moretti?
If you go further into, and you're talking about the I-80 project, is that correct, Representative?
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
You know, if you take a look at the department, and again, this is the survey information that came from the department, but essentially, you're right, it is sort of a mix of projects, you know, and also policies from, you know, variable speed limits, which obviously is not construction, adding more truck parking spaces. That's a problem across the country because there's not enough spaces, and obviously if truckers are just pulling off on the side of the road, or even worse, not stopping when it's appropriate, it's a significant problem there. But then it also looks at a variety of other potential benefits in terms of you know, improving that corridor. So and you know, and it looks like some of them, I see your point. They haven't gone ahead and fully you know, gone ahead and explained some of the other improvements there.
Mr. Chairman, my second, and thank you, I get that, but YDOT can maybe help us with that there offline. On page 4, under your population, travel, and economic trends in Wyoming, I found this section to be really important because as we attempt to make policy, we'll make funding policies probably based on our GDP and potential revenues coming into the state. And so I thought this information was really helpful, except for, you note in there from 2000 to 2023, our GDP had increased by 51%. So I tried to follow that up, and I tried to use the same information you did, and I'm not finding a 51% increase. From 2008, we've not recovered. Well, I should say we barely recovered from our high in 2008 of 41 billion last year. So we've been flat from 2008 to 2025 and 26. But the information in the report would say that it was fairly robust, but I'm not sure, even using that, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, the Bureau of Economic Analysis data, that I went and used their data, and it just shows that we've been flat. And so I'm just wondering, maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. And if you could help me with that.
Now, the comparison is from 2000 moving forward, and recently now the 2024 estimates are out as well. And so if you go back to the actual Bureau of Economic Analysis, they run a table, but you have to make sure you're looking at it adjusted for inflation. And I suspect that you're correct, that the significant boost was leading up to 2008, and I know the state, like all states, but I think Wyoming probably got hit even more hard. You know, it was even a more challenging economic climate. You can look at it adjusted for inflation year by year, so you can pick out, you know, which years that you want to focus on. But certainly, we saw that with vehicle travel. While there's a nearly 20% increase from 2000, the reality is post-COVID, Wyoming vehicle travel has been slowly getting back to pre-COVID levels, and still is a little bit lower than it was pre-COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything further for Mr. Moretti? Mr. Moretti, the only question I have, and it's kind of an interesting one, it's slightly off topic, but it is something that came up during our discussions on the floor this past year and actually the year before. And you mentioned it kind of in passing on page 18, but it's the 6,000 full-time jobs that our surface infrastructure does, roughly, the 6,000 full-time jobs. Do you have a rough estimation of where that ranks per capita across the rest of the nation? It seems to me like that's an exceptionally large number of jobs for such a, I will call it such a small window of time that we have, and you're putting those as full-time jobs. So just curious, like when you look at other states, especially in the South, where they have a full-time availability of doing their surface transportation, what does that actually look like? And do we have any idea what that translates back to economically for the state of Wyoming versus other states as well?
When you look at the 6,000 full-time jobs, about half of those are essentially in construction or the engineering of preparing those, and then the other are full-time jobs created by that additional income. How that translates per capita is an interesting question, and we haven't run that data. What I'll do is I'll provide the committee more information on that source so that you can take a look at, it's a valid question. Per capita, are you creating more jobs than you are in perhaps other states? To some extent, it is impacted by the cost of labor, which is variable, and as you would anticipate, in some states it might be a little bit more expensive than others. So we'll provide you with the source data for that, so that you can examine that and get a sense of if you're being more or less impacted in terms of job creation. But those are essentially the jobs created by the transportation investment being made in your state. The other figure in there is from a report about a decade ago, which unfortunately, although we find it very valuable, the organization that did that report hasn't updated, is just pointing out that a significant number of key industries, including tourism, energy, and agriculture, obviously are very reliant on the state's transportation system.
Thank you very much. And I think the other thing that I would be interested in on that is the 6,000 full-time jobs. One of the big conversations that was had on the House floor was whether or not those are governmental jobs or whether those are private sector jobs. And as Ms. Little is bringing this forward to us from the contractor's perspective, I would venture to guess that the vast majority of those are private sector jobs. But if we could get some of that information, I think that would be helpful for the committee as well. Anything further for Mr. Moretti? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Moretti. Appreciate you being here. Director, do you have anything that you'd like to follow up with this in specific?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things I wanted to kind of answer. I think Senator Kolb had a question about the list of projects and where it came from. Definitely, as Mr. Moretti said, they surveyed us. I think I spoke in my opening comments that we've tabled a lot of the projects, or they came up as a need, but looking at our funding streams, there's just no way that we could feasibly do them without an increase in revenue. So they've been tabled. So those projects just keep growing as the need keeps growing. And so it was relatively easy dust off for the team to be able to provide that for this report. I think a lot of those projects, or at least the ones that probably are on the top 10, are things that I've mentioned to you in not just on the dais, but in passing as well. These are projects that We've, again, tried to shift the engineering side of the house to get them shovel ready, not tabled, shovel ready. So then we can present to you guys in a menu style that if, Lord willing, the Craig report looks good this year, maybe we want to dabble in that a little bit. But so I just wanted to just double down on that. And then also, Representative, you had a question about potential increase in maintenance. Well, anytime we expand our system, which we haven't really done over the last 15 years, anytime you expand lane miles, anytime you expand facilities, horizontal facilities, it requires more maintenance. So you're adding more square footage to a bridge deck, more lane miles to our system. So we have more miles to plow. We have more miles to do surface treatments on into the future. And so there's always that possibility. We're hopeful that the growth will be in a way that we can adjust, and maybe technology will catch up that we may or may not need more personnel, but we should be able to try to adjust in increased revenue to ensure that we can maintain what we build. The preservation only mode that we've been in for the last 15, 20 years is just that. We've taken the revenues we've had and make sure that we could maintain our system to a level of roughness or smoothness, as you will, to ensure the traveling public can feel okay. But we're just touching the top 2 inches. And there are some areas, if you've been south out of KC, you've ridden the roller coaster there on I-25. Hopefully we're addressing some of that this year. It's under significant construction right now, correcting that subgrade. And that's again, a prioritization that we made a decision that we needed to do that, not just go make the surface nice and pretty and smooth. Even though not that this is rough, the roller coaster is not necessarily on the roughness side of the house, but.
Representative Larson, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Westby, thank you for that clarification, because that's really important, I think, for this committee to understand is as you've taught us, and we delineate from what we can do with federal funds and then what we can do with state funds. So my question to you, if I understand correctly, is we can use the federal funds for a lot of things that pertain to construction, but when it comes to maintenance, those are generally state dollars. And the reason it was important in my mind, Mr. Chairman, for that to be clarified in the report is because if we expand our overall miles, we can maybe use federal dollars one time to get that construction done, but we're going to then expand the need for state dollars for ongoing maintenance and understanding the impacts of those construction efforts on the budget for maintenance is worthy of this committee's understanding. Does that make sense?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, you're correct. Federal dollars, we can build new, we can do major construction, mill and overlay, we can do some significant surface treatments, but snowplow driving, fence repair, guardrail repair, trash cleanup, culvert clean out, all that stuff is correct, stateside funded.
Representative Nicholas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just kind of want to fill in some gaps of the data that's presented in here and do a little deeper dive on it. So I've got a couple components to it.
Okay.
So for example, the question earlier was if we have 6,000 full-time jobs created by our transportation system, what is that number? Is that private folks you hire, or does that include all of your employees? Where does that number come from?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, and I think Mr. Moretti was going to send that source data to show where those 6,000 jobs were going to either be. I agree with him. I don't necessarily think it's huge amount of growth in state side of the house. It's more growth in the private sector that's going to perform the actual construction side of the house as well as the ancillary jobs that come with that. But I think that source data is, was promised to be sent out.
So to follow up on that issue, I take it then that YDOT does not keep track of that for everyone you hire and all the work that they do and the number of actual road personnel and work that they're working on projects, because we're paying for all of it, right? So it seems to me that you ought to have that data. And so they would just ask you for it to find out what those numbers are. Where else would they get it?
Mr. Director, if you want to answer it, my only thought on that is there's a lot of construction companies that do a lot of other construction work for other than YDOT. So if we asked YDOT to collect all that information, we're going to have some skewed data that if company X hires, 1,500 employees across the state, but they're only working for YDOT on a fraction of their contract bids. But Mr. Director, do you have any idea of the information that you might be able to provide the committee on what your contracting base looks like?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I personally do not. I can see what my team does. I know from a labor standards perspective, we do know how many people are on a construction job. We do know what they're being paid and whether it's fair and equitable. That's part of the contracting with the federal dollars that we get to ensure that that's being done. As for how many people, I think you hit it on the head. How many people a company out of Cheyenne is hiring for road construction, where we may or may not be a 50% of their revenue share. There's county and local governments that are also pulling into their transportation needs as well. So I can dive into what kind of employment information I have and get that back to you.
Thank you.
Representative Nicholas, follow-up?
So we really don't know that number. And this number to me is basically a swag. Because we don't know any component of what it's based on. And the only ones that would know that would be you guys as a practical matter. And that's what this tells me with this as we're moving forward, unless you have more information. So.
And Mr. Chairman, I would say let's wait to see what Mr. Moretti brings back as source data on how they derived at that 6,000 number, and have that validation at that point.
So my next question, Mr. Chairman, is on the 1 through 25 projects here. That's a list you provided to them. Is that correct? And you created that order.
Mr. Director?
Mr. Chairman and Representative, we did send them the list. It is not necessarily in prioritization order. No.
And then I want to go back to the question that came from the good representative from Sweetwater County. The reason that the large project in Laramie County on the between I-25 and I-80, my understanding is that's a special project where you make an application for that particular project to the feds, and we're anticipating that that's going to happen, even though the money hasn't been allocated. We've kind of, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but we've kind of had the go-ahead to start moving forward with that from the feds.
Mr. Chairman, you are correct, Representative. We have, as an agency, shown that it is a priority, a high priority. We've been successful in getting discretionary grants to do the preliminary, as well as some of the finalized design planning dollars. We as a state have matched I think it's 13 million. How much? $13 million grant to do the design. We have matched it graciously with the governor's IIJA match funding that you guys set aside for those type of projects. Going forward, it's $500 million, sorry, at least at this point project. It will significantly require a large federal discretionary grant to move that project forward.
And what's the status of that? Where is it now, and what do you anticipate?
We're finalizing design as we speak. We're looking at if all goes well, Mr. Chairman, sorry, Representative, if all goes well, 28 construction, we have to wait for the notice of funding opportunities from the feds. All of this is all hampering on the new funding transportation bill, the big reauthorization that we're working extremely hard with our delegation. We've been out to DC several times to ensure rural America stays whole. That's our biggest push. We don't want to go backwards. There's some of these big discretionary grants that they're looking to reduce, which we're somewhat in favor of, some of the minor ones, but some of the bigger ones, we know that we want our opportunity to go after those funding sources. So the big mega, which is called mega grants, trying to ensure that we have the opportunity to apply for those funding sources when they come available.
And then, Mr. Chairman, looking at the remainder of the list, these are all items that I've seen over the years. I mean, I don't see really almost anything new on this list. And they all look to be improvements, right? You're adding passing lanes, you're doing things which are over and above replacing highways. So how much of that $500 million budget does that include this 25 projects, or is that, or does it not? And how much of a percentage of that 500 million deficit are these projects?
Mr. Chairman, in some of that, and Representative, under that unfunded need, there are some of those projects in that unfunded need amount. I would say that if you look on the list, about not halfway down, but somewhere down, 2026 is on that list from here to Thermopolis. That was the one project that we had somewhat close to being on the shelf. And that's why it's going to be funded. It's funded with a little bit, hopefully, if we get a discretionary grant, we'll fund it with some more federal dollars, some formula dollars, and then also with the sales tax on the vehicles will be helping fund that project. But we were not able to move that project forward with the funding without it being on the shelf. And that's why the big push to try to get the team a little bit more focused on getting shelf-ready projects for these projects. But
So, Mr. Chairman, follow-up,
Follow up, last one.
that really doesn't answer the question. How much dollar-wise are these projects part of that 500 million? I think we need a breakdown of what is what so we know what we're talking about.
Mr. Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm getting to your question now, or it's starting to sink in what you're saying. Yes, we have in the 2019, there was a breakout of that said, future expansion capacity and safety growth projects. We have dusted that off and we can get you that number as soon as it's finalized. But there is Mr. Chairman, just to follow on to that, in that 500 million unfunded need, out of the 370 that are road centric, part of that out of that 500, there are some capacity and expanded growth numbers in there. Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, our neighbors here that was a little loud apologized. They're doing some mental health training. There's an open invitation to any of the public that gets frustrated with the committee today to join in that exercise. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Larson. Mr. Director, one thing that I think we might want to do, and it's something that is hinging on the line of questioning that Representative Nicholas, our recovering appropriator, is kind of focusing on here. And I think the committee would benefit from this as well. And if you go to page 11 on the actual trip report, and you guys have mentioned this over and over and over in the 10 years I've been on this committee, is the complete flip-flop of our state share versus federal share and how much we depend on federal funds versus our state level funds. How much we as a state choose not to invest in our roads. We ask the federal government to cover that comparatively to what other states around us do. I think it would be helpful for us if we're going to look into this further, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper when we start talking at our next topic here. But it may be of interest, not only from you, but Ms. Little, you as well. If we can find out what that share of those other states' dollars are. Is it all fuel tax? Are they diverting sales tax? You know, those types of things, especially in the ones that are closest related to us with population size versus the amount of road miles that we have, those types of things. It's very easy to look at this and say, yeah, we don't spend as much money here at a state level, but maybe breaking that down and helping us understand what these other states around us do may help us with that funding discussion on the floor.
And Mr. Chairman, what may be helpful, if I could take you back, maybe even last year, Talise did a great job of researching a lot of that. If you recall some of those conversations, every state's different, right? Some states push a lot of general fund. A lot of people have unique ways of funding their highways. At the end of the day, what we keep looking at is where's infrastructure in the prioritization of the state? If it's high priority, then we need to figure out how to fund it. If it's not a high priority, then we'll just keep doing what we're doing to try to keep as good roads open as long as we can. But with the decreasing amount of buying power, the amount of what we can do continues to diminish. And so it's getting to the significant point that we know we have a lot of those projects that are in that list of 25 that we should have done probably 20 years ago. They're not any less important now than they were 20 years ago. They're probably obviously more significantly important now. The I-25 is one of them. We're getting close to being an F in that interchange. So I just think it's important.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Director, I just want to affirm there's been some discussion about employment impact and roads. So I just want to confirm. Department 45 is a department you oversee, and I see 553 jobs. So less than 10% of that 6,000 potential employment impact. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, you are accurate.
Thank you.
Any more questions on the trip report? Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Westby, just another way of maybe looking at the federal state money, miles per population, give an idea, like how many miles of road do we actually have as opposed to our population? Because I think that would definitely be a metric I'd certainly think would be helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Seeing no further, we do have one more question. Nope. Okay. An answer potentially that we had from last year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we have that last year. I'm sure we can
Pull that data back.
pull that
Yep.
up.
And I appreciate the director bringing that to us. I do remember us having it. We probably have all of this data within the past 10 years. Literally, this discussion has not changed a bit, other than we actually did some work on it over the past 2 years to get some funding to you guys.
And Mr. Chairman, my apologies for not reaching out to Talise to maybe dust that off for today's conversation. Fast and Furious month.
Understood. Thank you, Director. Let's go ahead and open this up for any public comment. Ms. Little.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for having me. My name is Kelly Little, Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. I wanted to thank Tripp and Mr. Moretti for coming on today to present the report. I want to thank the department for their help in gathering the documentation for the report. I will say I think that the value of the report is it takes the information from the survey that Tripp got from WYDOT, but it also includes data from the U.S. Census Bureau, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, the National Bridge Inventory, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Wyoming Department of A&I, our Economic Analysis Division, and the U.S. Energy Information Administration. So, and it takes all of that information and it puts it into one document that's easy for you all, for the public, for the folks working in the industry to understand and really make sense of. So I appreciate Tripp for putting the report together. I will say that on some of the questions around careers in Wyoming related to road construction, just to give you all an idea, in our association, which not all of our members are strictly road construction companies, but we have 90 contractor and specialty members in our association. That doesn't tell you how many employees per se, but that will give you an idea of how many companies are members of ours. That doesn't include some of the other road contractors that aren't in our membership. But then we also have, including that 90, we have 256 total members. So on top of that, we have suppliers, we have engineering firms, we have folks that provide insurance, provide hospitality. All of those things affect the construction industry in Wyoming. So whether it's a first degree of separation, a third degree of separation from the industry, I think the main point I'm trying to make is that the industry in and of itself has a big impact on the economy in Wyoming. So that's kind of what I wanted to follow up with on some of the questions that were answered or asked earlier. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Little and the Contractors Association? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, we do. We have one. Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Little, so talking about the jobs issue, what percentage is cyclic? We have construction season and we have the rest of the year, or maybe it's the opposite. But anyway, so how much is it cyclic? Just in, whatever reference you might have with your members, is it 2X, 1X, 3X between those two? Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman.
Little.
Yes, Senator Barlow, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I will say it's very apparent that construction work in Wyoming is cyclical. Particularly the companies that do the work on the ground, they do have quite a lot of seasonal employees that come on during the summer. But a lot of them are also, depending on how the winter goes, this last winter, a lot of them were able to keep some of those folks on to do work throughout the winter. So that's helpful. And then I also think, when I was talking about those other further removed, but still impactful companies, including engineering firms and suppliers and equipment dealers and all of those people, that part of the industry is not cyclical. I mean, I think it ramps up during construction season, but those people have good full-time jobs throughout the year in Wyoming.
Thank you, Ms. Little. And I think that's the important call out that I caught on this is the report specifically named the 6,000 full-time. That's a significant amount of full-time jobs. We certainly know that there is a vastly higher number in the cyclical world. So appreciate that. Okay, we'll take any further public testimony on the trip report. Seeing nobody rushing to the mic, we will close public testimony. Committee, any directives for LSO regarding the trip report? Anything from the committee? Seeing none, we will go ahead and, yes, Senator Barlow. Go ahead. What was that, Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So some of us are very new to this committee, but there were some materials that were referenced of previous studies that LSO had done, and particularly on the finance issue. So if those could be added to the index of committee materials in the record, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And Talise, if you can just maybe copy the committee on hyperlinks to past data that we have. There is a incredible wealth of data over the past 10 years over this exact same thing. The updated data, even just from last year, that we really dived into to get that. I guess it was 2 years ago, actually, when we really hit it hard with the sales tax bill was probably the most impactful. So.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. And the stuff we done on that possible fuel tax last year, we got into a lot of the population by miles and population per capita on fuel tax that supports those miles, I think is
Perfect.
helpful, particularly to Senator Cope's point.
So if you can just provide us a couple hyperlinks there to the committee, either now or at the end of the meeting, that works for me as well. With that, we'll close this topic. Committee, that puts us at 9:53. I know it's only been an hour and a half, but I'm guessing that's probably enough information before we dive in deep into the next topic, which is going to be that House Bill 82. So let's take about a 10-minute break, bio break, and then we'll be back in here. Let's call it at 10:05, and we're going to start right on the dot. We're gonna go ahead and herd these cats back in order here if we can, for as best we can. I know the LSO slide up there said 10:15, but I had said 10:05. I just want to keep us at least on some level of, we're now 5 minutes behind. So now we start that process of coming behind the process here. So with that, we are going to roll right into our 10 o'clock discussion, which is YDOT funding and 2026 House Bill 82. I do not see Representative Harshman here. Oh, he's online. Fantastic. Even better. I kind of figured he was working today, so I'm glad to know we've got him here. And there he is. So Representative Harshman, thank you so much for joining us, sir. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and then if you can just kind of walk us through the nexus of your bill and also the budget amendment that was adopted by the House.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the Transportation Military Affairs Committee. It's an honor to join you today. I served on this committee years ago. Steve Harshman, I'm representing House District 37. Been blessed to represent Southwest Casper now for 24 years. And so this idea really, and this committee continually talks about funding issues. And we know, traditionally set up as a gasoline fuel tax. And those days are changing, certainly. And so this idea was really to use what you go back to the kind of founding of the Perm Mill Trust Fund. And part of the debate and the ideas back then was be that we would grow this fund, but initially wasn't invested in equities. But the idea was that at some point we'd invest in ourselves, and those are called public purpose investments. And our statute then has incorporated those. And really what we've done traditionally in Wyoming are water projects and like farm loan, irrigation type projects. And the legislature has currently authorized then up to $1 billion of the corpus can be invested in these public purpose investments. And they are generally lower yield. They would replace part of the portfolio that is lower yield. So we're not going to trade the high performing equity type things for lower performing. And so that's kind of the idea behind that. And then, so as we're looking for ways, and this committee, as you've worked in this legislature, I mean, you've gone after sales taxes, done all those things. The problem with all those is, you rob Peter to pay Paul. And I think those get into issues. And I think, the fuel tax is another one. I think, as studying the fuel tax over the years, we know that it has a minimal impact on the price of gasoline and diesel. We know how that is assessed at these national racks. And I think when the last fuel tax increase, 12 years ago or so, 10-cent fuel tax, the University of Wyoming study said it raised gasoline tax by 1 penny. We have a 24-cent fuel tax, I believe, still. It's a little bit lower than Nebraska, a little bit lower than Utah. It's always been kind of a policy thing. It should be similar because so much of that fuel tax is, on I-80, and that's an apportioned fuel tax no matter where they fuel up. That Wyoming receives the benefit of that. And so I think all those things, though, and now with skyrocketing gasoline prices, there's going to be calls to really maybe suspend the fuel tax and see if we can lower fuel by 24 cents. Now, that's a sticky issue. That's not the point of today, but I want to, there's going to be pressure on fuel tax. So this idea was really to authorize then in the bill, it was kind of a 5-year deal of $250 million and then a 5-year payback with our higher yield investment incomes out of the SIPA, the Strategic Investments Project Account. And as you members know, with the governor's very good veto of a year ago, we guarantee the full 5%, or 2.5%, I should say, of the 5% spending policy, 2.5% goes to the SIPA. 250 million a year and growing. Part of that goes to obviously school CapCon and maintenance. But basically these loans from the corpus, these would be paid back with a higher yield in the SIPA. And so it's a way to kind of get out in front of this. And I know you could say, well, why don't we just appropriate it out of the SIPA? You certainly could, but I think this is a way to kind of maybe come up with a large sum of money when perhaps YDOT needs matching funds, or perhaps we need them right now, and then you can pay it back over a couple of years. Over, a budget session, which would only last 2 years, you could extend it for 5 years. So, Mr. Chairman, the bill had that public purpose investment part in there, but it also then, and it spelled out, I just went and talked with YDOT and really got the deadliest highways in Wyoming. And I understand why we have a highway commission. I mean, in my time in the legislature, I think we actually appropriated money for one specific highway project in Lincoln County on a coal project to go around a coal mine, I believe. That's the only time I ever remember us appropriating to a specific project, because we just don't do that. And so I listed these deadliest roads and this whole Rock Springs Green River Tunnel alternative route, I think, is a real issue that was, for our state. But then it said in the bill that the commission then can pick which ones. So we just gave out the list in this bill. Did the same thing in the budget amendment that was passed on third reading. But of course, none of the House positions were adopted in the budget and in that 15-minute negotiation. Anyway, that's another issue, Mr. Chairman. But so the interest rate in the bill would be fixed, set by the treasurer, but I put a cap on it at 2.5%, and then the loan repayment then would be up to 50 million a year to pay back that 250 million, and just kind of going in these. And then, Mr. Chairman, of course, that'd be a nice, clean, simple little bill in the budget amendment that passed. The rest of that bill had a second part and was really a task force to look at I-80. And that's the elephant in the room, as you guys know very well. And I think, I can't remember, but my time on that committee, it seemed like one fully loaded truck does the damage to the roads of 10,000 plus cars. And so how do you kind of take these, the high use on a road truck, is there a more efficient way to do that? And so the idea was to look at, is there a way we could run like a YDOT railroad right down through I-80, and these guys would pull on the, and I think other states have looked at this, Texas, others, and you would just pull on to basically like getting on a tram or something. You would just ride that thing and wake up in Pine Bluffs and really take these heavy loads off of I-80, and then it would, I think, dramatically reduce. Now that's an idea, but how you kind of implement that idea is a whole nother deal. But it had a little study of some groups, some smart people to get together and kind of think about this, even if it's possible. But I think this whole truck thing, and then with our 80 plus mile an hour speed limit with heavy loads, it's a lot of damage, as you guys all well know. So, Mr. Chairman, that was the idea, to use public purpose investments and to pay them back with the SIPA account, 50 million a year, and borrow on these $250 million, up to $250 million chunks. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. And
Thank you, Representative Harshman. Representative Larson.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Representative Harshman. Good morning. So in the bill, and there's a couple of points, Mr. Chairman, if you'll allow me, but my first question is, in the bill where we pay that back with SIPA funds, it says that we use them from any unexpended SIPA dollars. And so I'm trying to think of the timing on that. If we come in with these SIPA dollars and we're taking care of all of our school construction, state construction, generally we don't have any unexpended SIPA dollars. So is it worth clarifying and saying before any other funds of this account are expended out of SIPA. I hope that makes sense. And was that your intent, or was you just thinking there'd be a few crumbs left over that we would be able to use?
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great question, Representative Larson. And I think, it's a policy question. I put it kind of at the end of the chain, but keep in mind now, the SIPA has changed. It was not guaranteed in the 5% spending policy previously, to Governor Gordon's probably his greatest veto in his governorship, if I might add that. But now it is the full 2.5% is guaranteed, with 2.5% going to the general fund. So the SIPA has changed dramatically and is a really important tool, I think, now for the legislature. I put it at the back end, but I think if we get to an experienced appropriators, they'll understand that, and kind of that'll be out there. That's how I saw it in my 10 years on appropriations. I think I would always have that kind of, not too far out of sight when I'm building budgets for our state.
Follow up.
Thank you. So then, Representative Harshman, just to clarify, the investment from the corpus has to be paid back. It's a loan. It's a requirement to be a loan, and they have to be able to make money on it. You mentioned in your comments a minute ago that we could take it from SIPA, just fund it with SIPA, but you checked to go this way. My question to you is we actually, with this bill, are funding it from SIPA. The value of taking the $250 million loan from the corpus is it provides that whole pot of money, and we don't have to wait year to year on the SIPA funds. It would just be there, and then we're backfilling, or we're making the payment back with SIPA dollars. And so my question to that is, am I understanding that approach correctly? And then I would, again, it just seems to me that if I have an obligation on some funds committed, that I maybe would have a serious consideration on the SIPA dollars, on taking that off the top instead off the bottom, because we're obligated to pay these three guys in the room from the Treasury back.
Representative Harshman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, and again, I think that's a policy question. I think they'll. I'm sure the good treasurer will want that at the top. I personally, though, as a longtime appropriator, and those are notwithstanding type language, and the legislature can change that certainly in the budget bill. But yeah, my thought was, that it would be towards the end of that, and we're paying back a loan, and we're going to pay ourselves back. There's no doubt. But I think the beauty of this is we're investing in our people. It's more jobs. Highways don't get any cheaper year after year. We can get after it right away, and we're going to have, more jobs. We're going to make money on our money and use it to invest in that. And frankly, you go after these really dangerous spots, and we're going to have less funerals. And I just think this whole thing is a win-win-win, and we could move this, particularly with the SIPA at the 2.5% guarantee, and we've got nearly a 7x reserve account. And I know there was, we got this deal last week from Craig, and it shows a 5-year deal. Keep in mind, folks, we are moved up to profile on the Craig a 2.5, 2.6 dividends and interest. So it looks like a drawdown on the reserve accounts every year. That just doesn't happen. And you're going to see on July 1st when we return about, I don't know, the treasurer can tell you, but it's a substantial already what we've returned. So I think our work and using COVID money and the savings we put in the reserve accounts, the 5X, common schools 7X, is really going to be incredible for our state. And so all of you played a part in that. Is really well done. That is going to 40 years from now, people are going to say, man, it's a good thing they did that. And so I think we're in that mode now, like I say, with a 2.5% guarantee, which is, 250 plus million and growing a year. And it's going to grow substantially every year. And as we move this corpus from 12 billion to 18 billion and on and on. So anyway, I think it's a smart way just to invest in ourselves and make money on our money. And it's a beautiful thing. We've been really blessed. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further questions? Specifically, I'm gonna really open this up for the senator side of things. We have heard this on the House side a few times, on the floor numerous times. And so I really would like to make sure that the senators, since it's died in House every single time, have a chance to really ask and poke holes in this and ask the questions needed. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm confused on the wording here on page 2 and page 3. Line 9 on page 2 says funding the construction of one or more highways approved by the Trade Commission. Again, on page 3, it says funds to the construction of one or more highways approved by it sounds like you're building new highways, the construction of one or more highways. What's the thinking on that wording?
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator. Good question. I'm opening the bill online here now, but I was working off the memo from LSO, but Mr. Chairman, that refers to the contained list. One or more of those is how that refers to. So you could certainly take that language off and just make this commission funding stream, and they could direct it wherever the commission wants to go. As I was working this, I wanted to really put a focus on kind of the most dangerous parts. Where are the most people, the most accidents, the most things happening? So I think the language in that bill refers back then, Mr. Chairman, to those specific projects that are listed in there. And Mr. Chairman, I just correct one thing. We have heard this in the House, and it did pass third reading budget amendment and moved on to this past year. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And appreciate that, Representative Harshman. My bigger call out there is, while it passed third reading on our side, it did not make it through conference committee. And I'm thinking a big portion of that was just the complexity of what we're talking about and the lack of understanding of what we were trying to do over on the Senate side. That, or we just had a joint appropriations committee that didn't want to give this the light of day as it went forward. So I don't know which that was, but is there anybody else who has any questions about we'll say the construction? I don't want to use that word, but the construction of this bill and or details of this bill. Senator Anderson, follow up, and then over to Senator Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, I note the offense of the Senate not understanding. I think I think they understood perfectly.
We'll come over to Senator Kolb next. Senator Barlow. Senator Kolb? Okay. Senator Kolb, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the understanding part goes, we were against the SIPA, to be clear. So this whole thing was basically in the trash can because of that. And I still stand against the SIPA, and I want to repeal it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further discussion? Senator Barlow, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So obviously there's a constitutional basis to do this, and the former speaker and representative talked about we've used it oftentimes, maybe in water, conservation utilization water. I don't know if we've ever used it for airports, et cetera. Those are section 10 and 11 of Article 16, but section 9 of that is improvement of roads. And the very last section of that, so this does not obligate the state to have a 2/3 vote for internal improvements. So this is, a constitutional type of approach adopted in 1915. It would be interesting to know if it's ever been used. But anyway, one of the things, the last, and this comes to constitutional construction. one of the last lines in that particular section talks about the state may pledge or appropriate revenues derived from such works in the aid of their completion. And it doesn't read very well with the rest of it. So my question is, would this authorize tolls on a highway in support of their construction and maintenance? If you have an answer for that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Harshman.
Representative Harshman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Barlow, appreciate the question. I don't have that right in front of me. You know, that's a good question for you as a joint group, I think, and your attorneys in the room. Yeah, and a little bit different, approach than this, but I appreciate the question, and I don't have that answer for you right here.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, and Representative Kolb, just to answer, and I think the key thing is if you want to get rid of the SIPA, I think the key is the spending policy. And do Wyoming's people today, are we going to restrict, investment income? And so we have to raise taxes on today's people or cut services, or do we want that to benefit today's people as well as tomorrow's people? And I think that's where the debate comes down, whether you have the SIP or not. I think the 5% spending policy, which is 5% of the 5-year rolling average of the corpus, is very conservative. And we certainly don't want to lose that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate that, Representative Harshman. Committee, any further questions on the construction of the bill for Representative Harshman? Seeing none, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you being here, Representative. We'll keep you online just in case there's anything that does come up on there, but I believe that takes us over to Ms. Hanson. Talise, did you have anything that you wanted to add to this as far as the construction and maybe some of the discussion that's happened at this point, or are you good?
Mr. Chairman, I'm available for questions, but he went through the bill, so.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you didn't have anything beyond that. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do have a follow-up question based upon the comments from our good senators. So Representative Harshman, if SIPA is not the source, or if SIPA goes away through action of the body, then how would you modify this bill to address that issue?
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Nicholas, thanks for that question. I think it would be like what we have done with the budget reserve account. If there is a bill that is successful to change the strategic investment projects account, those kind of things, it would have to include this and I think other obligations that the legislature has put on the SIPA account. They would move to the general fund or whatever it might be if the full 5% was guaranteed to the general fund. That's what we've done in the past, Mr. Chairman.
And I do think that that's an important distinction to call out here because we have seen the discussion about repealing the SIPA. And so if the committee is interested in doing something along this line, I think having a backup plan B of if SIPA disappears, we need to have that construction language in the bill as to how we would repay and what we would utilize. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that was the angst that the House felt with the repeal of the SIPA bill last year, as it put all of the pressure on the LSRA to backfill all construction, and it was only doing it and we took away that going to the school foundation account. So we were actually only going to guarantee 2.5% of the whole 5% to the benefit of the people of Wyoming. So I think this committee and others involved, whether it be in that effort or whatever, is just we would have to make a provision within the district, within what we can use on investment account to fund this. If we try to backfill everything, schools, the general fund, and all our capital construction from the LSRA, and give the governor 20% of the LSRA, you're only going to have about 2 years in the LSRA and it's gone. So that was the angst that we had. And so over this interim, as we look at that, I think it's trying to reconcile a steady ongoing funding stream that allows us to take care of the state's obligation on highways, on horizontal and vertical construction.
Mr. Chairman, could I just add?
Representative Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think, you go back kind of the history of the SIPA account, and I think there are a couple of you in that room that were there but the idea was to not put it all in the general fund. And so it's all profiled. It kind of all, boom, goes to other state needs. We wanted to kind of have a separate account. Initially, the idea was that it couldn't be profiled. It is now, of course, but because the state always has building projects, whether the good representative said horizontal or vertical, there are always things that are going to be built, and was to try to figure out a way to kind of fund that. And so that's what's keeping in line with really why it was started anyway. So it didn't just all go to the general fund and then just disappear into the budget and not be used to really these important investments for our state. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Committee, anything further for Representative Harshman and or legal on this side before we bring on the Department of Transportation as well as the Treasurer's Office? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and bring you guys both forward. Well, I guess there's only 3 seats, so we'll just do Director here first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Darren Westby, Director of WYDOT. Not a whole lot to add. I thought it was a good conversation. I think just one way I would answer Senator Barlow's question regarding tolls is, I don't know that this bill would authorize tolling, but to do tolling, we have to do a significant amount of investment improvement on a road in which to toll. These funds could be pointed towards some of that construction.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Director, you're not talking about an additional lane, though. Is that the construction you're talking about? Because there are tolling, under the federal pilot program. We can, if we're authorized, much as, Indiana is the only state right now that's been authorized, and they're going to be tolling all their interstates beginning 2029. But if we go under the pilot program, there will be no new construction. All those funds could go just into the maintenance of I-80.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that pilot program, we're still diving deep into to see the validity and the authority granted to that state to do so and what it entails.
Mr. Co-Chairman?
Yeah, so we did have a bill that was going to set up a tolling authority for the state to look at it. Didn't authorize tolling, if you recall the bill committee. And I think we should have passed something like that. I do think, as was mentioned earlier, there's, we've been looking at raising gas taxes and, all these small numbers. We need big programs. This is one. House Bill 82 will divert a lot of money. Tolling, I think, is a solution that a lot, Michigan's looking at it, South Dakota's looking at it, North Carolina, Wisconsin, they're all looking at it right now. There's only a limited number of pilot programs, and I certainly, as you well know, since I sit on your as liaison to your commission, I know the federal people. They actually are a tenant in my building, and so I've talked to John Carter, who's our acting director for Federal Highway Administration, and Scott as well, the deputy, I think Wyoming has a very good chance of winning one of those pilot programs. The question is how we do tolling in Wyoming. A lot of people fear that we're going to toll everything like E470 down in Denver. That won't work for Wyoming. We're not looking at that because you don't want to toll somebody going from Green River to Rock Springs or Cheyenne to Laramie, and but a single or maybe 2 tolling stations statewide would catch a lot of that. 65% of that traffic goes through the state, and we could collect a lot of dollars from those big heavy users. Granted, everybody has to be tolled, including us, my car, but I don't think we have to. A lot of people keep I hear them that we got to build another lane in order to toll it under that tolling program. And I've attended the IBTT, so the International Bridge and Turnpike and Tolling Association meetings, and also I'm on the NCSL National Transportation Committee meetings, and states can't find money to keep up with their road construction and maintenance. We just saw in the TRIP report, since 2018 to 2025, 160% increase in construction costs. That's over 20% a year. As well, we just can't keep up with that, and we need big dollars. Either that, or the state is going to have to come out of the general fund and start doing that, and I don't really see that happening. So anyhow, sorry, I'm diverting, but I don't think we have to build another lane, and I think the tolling option is something we should look at.
Anything further, Director?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I know one of the submissions that we put in is just the anticipated revenue for fiscal year 26, the pie chart that shows the estimated revenue that we're expecting to get. As you can see this is for the entire agency. We're 50% federally funded. Going back to a question that you had earlier, but I wanted to just showcase where all of our revenue streams are coming from. And if you had any questions on those, I do have my budget director here, or manager here, that he can help dive into some of those revenue streams if you have any questions.
Okay. Senator Colby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Westby, just in our area, or Rock Springs, Green River area, and I think everything going west, the folks go to, as a tolling issue, going to Salt Lake, right? So I guess, I know we've talked about it before, but some solution for people that live in Wyoming that would be exempt from the toll, that if they cross the border, going into Utah and come back out of Utah again, because it happens a lot in my area. And that's been the biggest opposition. It's been my biggest opposition, is the cost for people that I represent under that scenario. So I guess I'd look forward to maybe some other way of handling this to make the people in my area whole. Just some thoughts on that, or is just food for thought. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, I'm going to pull us back here. We're not talking about tolling. We're going to stay on topic here with the bill that is in front of us. I allowed a little bit of latitude with the co-chairman because he is my co-chairman. We're not talking tolling at this point. We are talking House Bill 82. Senator Anderson, please.
Mr. Chairman, on House Bill 82, we're asking for 250 million, which really doesn't solve our problem. Why wouldn't we do 500 million and just pay it back, 50 million a year for 10 years? Is it just because it couldn't get through, or what was the reason for not going for 500?
Representative Harshman, I'd let you take that one.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, great question. You certainly could, Senator Anderson. I like the way you think, man. And I agree. It was more just trying to, thinking how you could pass a bill. And Mr. Chairman, I would question for the good director, and I guess if maybe director, are there projects that require like a big chunk of money up front, like 250 million to match, let's say, or those kind of things, whereas you get fuel tax, I don't know, it's 160 million a year-ish, somewhere in there, but that comes in month after month after month, but where you could have a big infusion to maybe match something where you could really leverage this money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Representative,
Director?
to your point, and I think I'll answer one part of the question. I think the 250, not disagreeing with you, Senator, the 500 million, absolutely, I would love to have my hands on more. We could do more with more, right? But the one thing I think we have to keep in mind are the Treasury, that there's $1 billion cap on the PPI. And I don't know how much is available. So if we took it all for horizontal infrastructure, there may not be any more for other people to come in for requests for loans on others. So I think that's the unselfish way of saying we could have asked for all 800 million, but then it pretty much hamstrings the rest of the state for what they can accomplish. As for a major project that could suck up all 250 million, that I-80, I-25 interchange project, if we go after a mega grant, it is a 60-40 split with that. So the feds would pick up, 300 million. We'd have to come up with 250 million. So it could theoretically go to one project. We're working really hard to ensure that that isn't the case. We'll try to use some formula dollars as well as discretionary grant dollars to augment this, but that is one potential funding stream that would probably be needed to do a large project like that without completely decimating the rest of the state's STIP projects.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Director, are there federal funds that you would go for if you had a state match that you don't have a state match for? Are there any funds that you're just not going to chase because you don't have the state match to chase? And if so, what is that dollar amount, if you know?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, thank you for that question. Right now, we don't have any other projects on the shelf ready to go for going after some of those discretionary grants other than 2026 from here to Thermopolis. We're going hard at a discretionary grant, knowing that we have the vehicle sales tax to match it right now. And so that would spread those dollars. So the more of those projects you saw in the trip report, more of the projects that you've seen and heard from me over the course of the last 3 years at least, we're trying to get some of those projects on the shelf so we can be able to utilize some of these funds for that. Absolutely, we will go after every discretionary grant that the FHWA, USDOT offers to try to be as competitive as possible. Sometimes we're competitive and sometimes we're not. And the more we can match, you sweeten the pot in the competitiveness so they can spread their dollars a little bit further. So I think it gives us another tool in our toolbox to ensure that we can be more successful getting the just discretionary grant. Otherwise, we're using formula dollars that we receive, and then that just cuts out of the list. And we have to make those hard decisions. All right, we're not going to do project, 12, 13, and 14 to ensure that we can get the match done on the bigger projects.
Okay. Quickly, Representative Geringer, and then we're going to move over. We're going to start pushing forward and get over to the state treasurer's office after this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess that is kind of a little follow-on to is what I need for my question. What, in an ideal situation, how would up to 250 million get laid out over time? What would we need in the next, say, 5 to 10 years on an annual basis? Are we talking, say, a $50 million per year for the next 5 years, or what would we be looking at in terms of the need? And then I guess kind of as a follow-on to that, to Representative Harshman, is that do you foresee that $250 million be revolving? So that as over time, as we're doing projects and getting it paid back, are we able to pull those funds additionally? Is that a revolving kind of 250 million? But starting with Director, maybe. Director first, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would love it to be revolving. That would eliminate some of the stress. And to Senator Papas's conversation about, are there some grants we're not going after? As soon as they're on the shelf, we'll be going after everything. However, we always have to be cognizant of the fact that do we have the match that goes along with it? This would eliminate some of those concerns. What we've used to date is the IIJA governor's match, and that's been a very good comfort level for us to ensure that if we have a project ready to go and it's eligible for a certain discretionary grant under the notice of funding opportunity, that we go after it hard with that grant, knowing that it's there. And we get that somewhat pre-approved before we go after the grant funding, because you have to solidify the match before you can apply for a discretionary. So yes and yes, I guess is the quick answers to both those questions. Yes, we would love it to be revolving. Not sure how that would work in the bill, to know that we have an ongoing source of matching funds. And there are certain projects that just make more sense for us to use state dollars with, as opposed to a granting federal state side of the house. There's certain things that are a little more sensitive, need to be a little bit quicker. We can utilize state funding versus federal funding. Yeah, it unties our hands a little bit depending on the federal versus state side, whether it's fully state funded project or a grant match project to spread the federal dollars a little bit farther.
Okay, Representative Harshman, I'll give you the last word on this before we move over to the state auditor's office.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Director. And to answer the bill, the way it was set up, it would be an ongoing program. It would be part of the public purpose investments. And Mr. Chairman, to Senator Anderson, I think, and Treasurer can answer this, but I think the current PPI investment is only, I think it's maybe even under 200 million. It hasn't been used as much for the, for some of these projects as could be. So there is certainly room to raise this from 250 to 500. And Representative Geringer absolutely would be an ongoing program the way the bill is funded. So absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on. We'll bring the state treasurer's office forward. I don't see anybody from the state auditor. My guess is they might be online. Okay.
Good morning,
Good
Mr.
morning.
Chairman. My name is Dawn Williams. I'm the Deputy State Treasurer. I'm joined here by Katie Smith, who's our Chief Financial Officer, and Norman LeBlanc, who is our Chief Operating Officer. So the chiefs are in the building, and we just came to talk to you about our perspective as the investment fiduciaries of the State Sovereign Wealth Fund. And I differentiate that fiduciary because we're all fiduciaries of these funds. And so what we do, we don't have an opinion about the policy. What we want to do is give you all of the information so that you're able to make your decision with all of the facts. And that's where we're coming from here today. So that being said, just starting through the bill, we're just going to take some turns. On page 2, that very first sub A on line 4 says, with the approval of the State Loan and Investment Board. Now, public purpose investments are already defined in statute, and they don't go to the SLIB. They are directed by the legislature, and that language is reproduced on page 4. Where on line 18, starting on line 18, where the section 94715 under permissible investment starts. It says the state treasurer shall not do that. It's authorized or directed by the legislature. So I just wanted to point that out, that you all are the ones that do that. And I think that including the SLIB slows you down. So if the agency, if the Department of Transportation did decide that they wanted to exercise this program, then it would be that much more of a churn on the timing. And I think that we're trying to get them, that you're trying to get them access to funds sooner than that would require.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Dawn. And so as we talked about having this continually available, you could say up to 250 million or whatever that number is continually available for a loan that's repaid, and then then there it is. And then each year there'd be a true up of how much is available for YDOT before it's maxed out. Am I understanding that correctly?
Ms. Williams?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Representative Larson, that's true. Other than the language here in that, still in sub A on line 12, it's revolving until there's a sunset date, June 30th of 2030. So if you wanted to have that to be a revolving, that language would need to be removed. And I will tell you, we have almost 400 million of the 1 billion that is obligated for public purpose investments right now. So you still have room to go to 500 million should you decide to increase that amount.
Representative Larson?
And can you just kind of remind us, I think we have the dorms, do we have the dorms in there and what? Give us a flavor of that.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
I thought you might ask that, so I pulled up our annual report here. There is 175 million for capital infrastructure loans through the Office of State Lands. There is $50 million set aside authorized for farm loans through Office of State Lands Investments. Joint Powers Board loans are authorized 60 million, and student housing loans are also 60 million. We still have that, oh, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Representative, we still have the Gillette Madison has been repaid at this point. So that's still outstanding on our list here of 44 million. So we're about, when we remove that, we're about 350 because Gillette Madison is paid off.
Okay. Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, Dawn, Ms. Williams, you're talking about those funds are available, but actually how much is actually in use out of all those different categories? Thank you.
Ms. Williams?
Mr. Chairman, our outstanding investments right now are 96,860,000.
Representative Larson?
But in fairness to your office, it says you've got to have that much always available to be used for that much. So it's obligated, may not be committed, or the other way around, whatever the right word
Chairman, he's
is, right?
absolutely correct. Yep.
Okay. I have a question down on this side. Did not. Okay. Ms. Williams, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I hand it off to Norm, I do want to, this question has come up and I think it's a really good one. Representative Geringer asked it. How much would be anticipated to be exercised at a time? One of the things that that Norm's going to talk to you about here in a minute is that opportunity costs, the lost amount of investment income. If the entire 250 million were drawn at first and not expended, the way that the funds are invested, we would have to move them from the higher earning permanent mineral trust fund account to our state agency pool, which is our safest account, our checking account, basically, where it would earn a much lower rate of interest while those projects were being anticipated. So we would caution and encourage the department that should they be authorized to invest the entire or use the entire amount, they would only utilize it as an ongoing, as needed basis. And so I'm going to have Norman talk to you now a little bit about that opportunity cost and another suggestion that we have for you.
Norm, please.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Norman LeBlanc. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Treasurer's Office. And I would like to talk to you about the opportunity cost involved here. Prior to doing that, though, what I'd like to do is just suggest that in lines 16 through 19 on page 2, where we have the ability, the Treasurer's Office has the ability to set the rate, but it's capped at what is already an unreasonable rate of 2.5%. We would have no latitude there because 2.5% already is an unreasonable rate, and I'll go through why that is in just a moment. So you might just say that's the rate we're going to lend at. That's the concessionary rate that we're obligated to honor. The opportunity cost to the PMTF is the difference between what the PMTF makes and the 2.5%. So it's difficult to say exactly what that cost will be because we don't know when the loan would be drawn and we don't know when it's going to be repaid because as currently constructed, this bill would say that we get up to $50 million and we could get nothing. So it is difficult for us to exactly say what that opportunity cost is. We also don't know exactly how the market is going to react. So, but if I take just a few basic assumptions, so let's assume, just to keep it simple, that all 250 million is drawn on day one. There's a great match. We have to get out there. We want to get it done. And let's say we get the maximum 50 million, which again is not assured. The opportunity cost is the difference. Let's take the last 5 years. The PMTF has earned 9.1%. The opportunity cost is that 9.1% minus 2.5%. That's 6.6%. Over that time period, conservatively, we're talking about a cost of $63.5 million. And that's what you're costing additionally to build that road, to maintain that highway. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't do that. I'm just suggesting that that is a little bit inefficient.
Representative Larson.
So, Norma, I appreciate that, and I studied this a little bit, that comes back. My question to you is, then, did you take into account, because we're talking in a pool, state dollars? Doesn't matter if it's highway or yours, it's all state money. But if we see the annual cost of highway construction going up at the same rate, then there's actually less of a loss because we're not incurring that accelerated cost of construction. My question is did you play with those numbers any to combine the two approaches there?
Mr. Chair,
Please.
Representative Larson, no, I did not, because that argument has an issue, which is that it assumes that if you don't get it from the PMTF and do it now, then you will suffer that inflation cost. And that is not the only choice for funding the program.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
But for this conversation, that's the scenario we would use.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, question mark.
Mr. Chair, Representative Larson, we could constrain the conversation in any way we want, and we would be happy to run numbers. However, I would say that that is a constraint that is unnecessary. The fact is that we have a PMTF, which is earning a significant return and returning that to both SIPA and the general fund. Anything that means that our asset allocation cannot be the asset allocation that has been prescribed by SLIB and approved by SLIB reduces that rate of return.
Follow up.
So then are you suggesting going around the back door and that we pay a higher interest rate on the repayment and the SIPA? Would that help close that opportunity cost?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I'm not suggesting any back doors at all.
My choice of words, Mr. Chairman.
I might.
My choice of words.
I might characterize this bill as doing something similar rather than appropriating. But I'm simply stating that when one looks at this methodology, one has to look at the full picture and what all the costs are. And it may well be that that is the best option. But I just want to be sure from the Treasurer's Office perspective, with a fiduciary responsibility for the PMTF, that we are at least highlighting the opportunity costs involved in this kind of a concessionary loan.
Mr. Chairman.
My two appropriators, I knew this was going to be a fun little bill for us. Representative Nicholas.
Thank you. So Norm, I think you,
yeah,
I'm thinking that we're a little bit of apples and oranges here. Because the point is to use this as part of your investment portfolio to go down to your lower interest rates, right? So like your bond market and whatever quadrant that is, you can't use the entire PMTF 9% because that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about your guaranteed low income returns that you have in your portfolio. So the impact will be on those bonds where you're only getting 3.5%, 4%, not your total return out of the PMTF. But otherwise, this doesn't make sense. So what we're trying to do is replace those guaranteed funds that you have that is basically like equivalent to a bond market return. And so it's going to be around 3 to 4%. And so that's the whole concept of making money with our money, but not taking away the overall return on the total of the PMTF, because no one's going to come up and say, we're going to give up 6.5%. It's always an issue we have with the public purpose dollars. But the idea that you take that money and immediately move it to the pool account, I mean, we're smarter than that. And so I think we need to kind of couch it more in terms of what those real costs are and have a kind of a detailed conversation with that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Nicholas, if I may, I don't think that I would take a portion of our AAA and AA rated fixed income, which pays us on a semi-annual basis, and replace that with a concessionary loan that doesn't cover inflation and is not secure in its repayment. I think that would be financial malpractice.
So,
No, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to let our treasurers finish their presentation. Please scribble your questions down. We'll go down to questions here. We're running behind schedule here, and we still have a very important topic that I'd like to get to. So, Norm, I'd like to bring you back forward if you can finish off your side of the conversation, and then we'll pepper you with questions later.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. The second piece is that I would describe this as an inflation negative bond. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that the Federal Reserve's preferred measure for inflation is the core personal consumption expenditure, or PCE. Now, this eliminates volatile food and energy, so it's smoothed out already. Well, the last reading in February was 3%. That was before gas prices went through the roof. That's before fertilizer prices went through the roof. That's before we expect to experience inflation greater than that. So a 2.5% rate basically means that the PMTF is losing 0.5% per annum just by inflation. So if perhaps the opportunity cost is too high, let's at least focus on what we absolutely lose with regard to inflation. If the committee wishes to borrow from the PMTF, my suggestion would be that borrowing take place at where we could actually borrow funds if we were allowed by statute to do so. And generally, the benchmark that is used by the market is the securitized overnight funding rate, or so-called SOFR. You may have heard, bless you, you may have heard in the past a reference to LIBOR. This is the replacement to that. It's called SOFR. And that at the moment, and I didn't check it this morning, but as of Friday was running at about 3.65%. So at least there, we would be covering inflation, and it would be about where we could borrow money overnight. So we're not making any return on it, but we're not disadvantaging the other beneficiaries of the PMTF. I'd also like to suggest, and I know probably not the most popular thing in the world, but I'd like to suggest an alternative to appropriating or going to the PMTF. We could, I believe, and then we should explore whether this is correct, but based on my discussions with the municipal bond market, we could leverage Wyoming's AA+ rating, issue a bond that yields 2.5%. Now, we'd probably have to have a higher coupon, but we'd sell it at a premium. So the yield would be 2.5%. And we would give Wyomingites the ability to invest in a federal tax-free bond that is doing some good for Wyoming and not incur any of the opportunity costs. Now, clearly there are costs for issuance, but those costs for issuance are about 1%. Now, 1% on $250 million is a lot less than $63 million in opportunity cost. it's a lot less than paying a 2.5% coupon and losing the inflation markup. So just for consideration, that is the end of my comments, Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay, yes, Representative Larson.
are those bonds time limited? I mean, do you do them per time? Help me understand that just a little better.
Typically, Mr. Chair, sorry,
Fine.
typically, Representative Larson, those are for a fixed period. However, bonds can be structured so that they have various calls and various puts, et cetera. So you could probably enter a structured conversation. Now, the rates that I gave you were based on a conversation with a municipal dealer, and they were based on a fixed term and a fixed coupon.
Okay. All right. Katie.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is my first time testifying in front of you guys, so thank you so much. My name is Katie Smith. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the State Treasurer's Office. And after listening to some of the comments and the review of the bill, I think a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be a reiteration of what I think you guys already know, but just some reminders. And so with this coming out of the SIPA, the repayment, so on page 3, line 20 specifically, we are really suggesting or recommending a different funding source because of the reliance of that permanent mineral trust fund spending policy guarantee from the reserve account. So yes, it is guaranteed. However, if you guys remember a couple of years ago, we had asked for some appropriations to get those reserve accounts to a 5-time spend so that we could aggressively, more aggressively invest those reserve funds. They were sitting in our state agency pool originally, which is again, very safe, liquid investments. But with that amount of money, we thought, if we had that cushion of the 5%, we could invest it more aggressively. And we were granted those appropriations and have since moved those reserve funds to our total rate of return liquid fund pool. So if we start depleting those, granted, hard to say if that's going to happen, this spending policy coming up with the market, you have to be, you have to move on a dime. However, if we do, that will then result in us having to move those reserve funds out of that aggressive investment pool and back into the state agency pool. We have to have that 5-time spend in order to invest those more aggressively in that pool. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about that.
Please scribble your questions down. I'm going to let our presenters present before we start peppering them with questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also, another thing to keep in mind, and I think it's already been discussed about depleting down the corpus for, of course, not 250 maybe at once, maybe 50 at a time, depending on what the appetite will be with this $250 million for those projects. However, as those are being removed from corpus, that does and will effectuate the investment earnings that you receive off of the corpus. That is just the way that it will just simply happen. So just those considerations. So perhaps maybe the general fund or another funding source for that repayment of the loan would be something we would suggest you guys looking into.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I just?
Ms. Williams, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So two things. One thing that I think it was Representative Larson brought it up about the SIPA. Right now, it really, in our opinion, it isn't a reliable funding source for repayment of any sort of withdrawal from the PMTF because the legislature does appropriate it from it all at the time. I think it would be, it was Representative Geringer said, or somebody suggested you'd have to prioritize, I guess, that this repayment came from the SIPA first. But on the other hand, and then there is the, the tenuousness of the desire to keep that fund. So that's another reason that we would suggest a different funding source. And then the other thing that I would like to just reiterate, if you were to be interested in going a bonding route, the bond repayments are due in a fixed amount. So if the SIPA is used and we have up to 50 million each year for repayment of that bond, we might be in a position of 25 million this year, 50 million this year, and that would be, that would not be allowed under a bond repayment program. So again, just want to appreciate the opportunity to just kind of throw some facts at you and help you to, give you those things so that you can make the right decision. We will do whatever you ask us to do with a smile on our face, and appreciate the opportunity today.
Representative Larson, did you have a question you'd like to ask now, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would, and I appreciate this is really wonderful as we help consider structural considerations. Very much appreciated. Katie, what I couldn't track with you is you was talking about the reserve account. But theoretically, if we did use SIPA dollars and we made that the first payment out, that it wasn't of the remaining funds, but and we've got a spending policy of the 5%, and the 50 million payback or whatever that is first out, and it's within the guidelines. How then does that impact the reserve account?
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Thank you. Representative Larson. So yes, you're correct. There is the guarantee that goes into the SIPA. So if the spending policy isn't met, then that reserve account will be depleted, correct? Yes, you would have that $50 million payment potentially that would go right back to it. But depending on how much that guarantee is, if that's going to significantly dip below that 5 times spend, we're just very sensitive to that. If it dips below that 5 times spend at all, it implicates the investments that we can do in that new strategy.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
But in fairness to the conversation, that was the reason you guys proposed the reserve account, is so that we'd have access to that reserve account and not impact the corpus. And now you're trying to put guardrails around the reserve account so that you can more aggressively do that. And I get that, but I think there's a fairness in the argument that we want to have access to the reserve account and not impact the corpus. Is that a fair argument?
Katie?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yes, absolutely. We want you to have access to it. We want you to be aware of what those implications would be if you were to tap into it.
Representative Filer, you're good? Okay. I think what we've discovered is we're going through this. I appreciate having two former chairmen or two former appropriators on this, and also CapFin members. This gets very, very deep very quickly when it comes to the treasurer side of things. So I appreciate you guys coming up today. Do we have any further questions for the treasurer's office before we roll forward? Yes. Senator Barlow?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So is there a summary in the treasurer's report of what the public purpose investment returns are for the existing programs, how the legislature has identified those? So do we have that summary? And if it's not in the materials we have, could that be provided to the committee? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Williams?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, we'd be happy to send you that. They vary, since they're legislatively authorized, so it will depend on the timing of the authorizations. They range, in the most recent years, it's been 2.5%, but there's one that has a variable rate from like 4 to 6%, but we will definitely send that to you.
Excellent. Okay. We will say you guys are excused from the hot seat. Thank you guys very, very much. And then if we can bring on, I believe it is our actual state auditor herself, if we can bring on.
She said she's not sending, just answer questions.
Yep, just here for any questions. So I believe she's on ready for us, and I don't know if we have any. So Madam Auditor, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening to our questions. I'm peering down the dais on both sides, and appreciate you, because I know you have nothing better to do with your day than to watch the Transportation Committee. Senator Barlow?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Madam Auditor, welcome. So my question is, what role does the auditors have in any of this public purpose investment discussion? Thank you.
Excellent question, Madam Auditor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, to your point, I believe we were asked here just today, for answering questions. Our role in this bill is very mechanical And we don't have any, we would not interpret it as us having any leeway. It simply provides or requires us to make a calculation and perform a transfer annually, which is similar to what we do in many other places of the statute. So we reviewed the bill and don't have a policy consideration so much, but we believe we could meet the obligations of the bill as written, and we would just monitor it if it is filed and if those obligations change at all.
Okay, thank you, Madam Auditor. I see nothing here, so we will let you get back to your important work of writing the checks for the state. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
All right, we will take any public testimony on this topic before we roll into any committee directives. Is there any public testimony on the resurgence or the revival of House Bill 82 and or the subsequent budget amendment? Seeing none, we'll close public testimony. Representative Geringer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It has occurred to me, the discussion on House Bill 82 has also involved some discussion around other ways to accomplish this as well. And it's good information from the Treasurer's Office to realize what the cost of doing something like this is. I guess another potential idea in looking at, I think the governor originally proposed a sweep of about $250 million into the PMTF of excess revenue coming out of the budget. I think the number ended up somewhere higher than that. I guess maybe for the committee's consideration is, if we're talking about that same sort of money, what about creating something like a highway trust fund, where the excess revenue from the budget, instead of sweeping into the PMTF, let's roll that into a highway trust fund. Perhaps consideration for a new budget session down the road, but if we have that kind of excess revenue, we have a need that we have with highway department funding, why not create another kind of vehicle where we can do this same sort of concept? If we had $290 million from this last budget session to sweep into the highway trust fund, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Just throwing that out there for some consideration.
Okay. Committee, anything further? Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think some of the information we've been given about a bond issuance, I think that should be explored, and to find out just how it would fit into the situation. It makes the most sense to me at this point in time to look into that. So I'm in favor of exploring the bond issuance scenario of funding, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Filer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think, as these discussions always bring up ideas, like we can do this, we can do that, or we can't do this, and this is what's going to cost us here. There's so many different discussions around how do we get to the right path. So, Mr. Chairman, so I think, when we go down this road, instead of kicking the can down the road all the time and trying to figure out ways to help fund our roads here in the state of Wyoming, I think it'd be a good idea to take this House Bill 82, the bond issue, where we can get extra revenues, maybe surplus of money, highway trust fund, whatever those might be. But, and I know nobody really likes these because they're kind of a pain, but Mr. Chairman, I think that a working group would actually help us, especially coming back to the next transportation meeting, and work with LSO and actually look at all these different things and maybe come up with somewhat of a concrete plan that we can start from and actually work from, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is that a formal motion?
Yes, sir, Mr.
Okay, so there is a motion on the table to form a working group to discuss this in a deeper context and come back to the committee between now and our next meeting and bring a concrete proposal forward to the committee for consideration. Do we have a second as well from Representative Geringer? Any discussion? Representative Nicholas.
So in terms of practicalities and reality, I think a working group would be a great idea. I think the report will have, and the likelihood of moving forward will be contingent on the outcome of the primary elections. So I don't think a final report can be done until then, realistically. So I would put like a September 1st or September 30th deadline on what's developed. We've got other funding sources that I think that working group should work with, including some of the ones that we've looked at last year through the previous kind of a working group to do it, and kind of put them all in the same box and just, would be my suggestion, or to modify the motion.
Okay, so there is an amendment to the motion, basically to make sure that the report and or the discussion does not come back until September 30th. And then to utilize similar measures that we utilized last year and the discussions brought forward last year on the fuel tax. Same stakeholders, those types of things going forward. So the bringer of the motion and the second good with that. So that actually we'll just incorporate that into the discussion as opposed to an amendment. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Co-Chairman Brown. I too agree a working group would be very beneficial. What I would like to see the working group though do, if it's agreeable to the committee, is this House bill, which I was a co-sponsor of, I think is a good first step. It was an Interstate Highways Traffic Study Task Force. I think the task force has to be broader than that. Okay, I think it should be a highway funding task force, and it ought to look at all options, not just the investment options that are bringing up here, but look at all the other things we've been talking about, whether it's tolling, whether it's whatever. I think we need a broader look than just resurrecting House Bill 82. Might be a good step to start with, but I believe that we need a broader bill to encompass not just the interstate, as the title says, but all highway funding and a lot of other options. And certainly I would like to see us not dive into the weeds here and start picking out projects like it does in Section 3 here. So I would ask the working group, and if the committee is agreeable, that we make it a broader bill, and not just on the specifics of House Bill 82.
So we'll go with Representative Larson, and then have anybody down here? I thought I saw somebody. Okay, Representative Larson.
As I don't disagree with the co-chairman's assessment that it needs to be broader. But if we're going to create a task force to look at a broader section, we probably should have maybe done that in a management council piece and brought that and had that move forward a little further. I think just my perspective, I think keeping it somewhat focused is going to allow a working group between now and our third meeting, really the ability to focus on that and come up with a good recommendation for a bill draft or not. I think if we broaden it, we're going to come back with a copa cornea of what we're going to have for side dishes at Thanksgiving versus how do we address this one thing. And I think, Mr. Chairman, what we're trying to say here is where is the available dollars? We've got the PMTF that's already existing, we can take from it, but at what cost? And then, or do we create a new account and draw from it on investment earnings? But how long will it take to get that up to the level of a corpus that then we can actually draw of it meaningful? And so I think, or can we go an investment strategy like using a bond, and does that indebts the state, but is it cheaper in the long run? I think those are the questions we're trying to answer. And yes, I'll wind up, but I would just think that we've got plenty on the plate with this one thing.
Okay. Senator Culp quickly, and then we are going to take a vote.
Quickly, I agree with Representative Larson's point of view. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So what I will say, just to surmise this a little bit, is this is going to be a rifle shot as opposed to a shotgun approach. This committee has taken a look at a shotgun approach multiple times over the past 4 to 6 years. I like this idea of putting a task force together with a rifle shot approach in this working group. Sorry, thank you. This is not a task force. That would need to be statutorily authorized. So thank you for that recommendation. So the motion on the table is to have a working group put together. The co-chairman and I will assign members to that to bring us something together by September 30th. Staff, any questions before we vote? Okay. This is a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Seeing that passes. All right. With that, we are thoroughly behind schedule here. So what we are going to do, we are going to bring up the Highway Patrol Administrator / Director again. And we are going to have a little bit of a discussion here. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this. I will say, similarly to this and our 11 o'clock discussion that was asked for by the County Commissioners Association, this was brought up after the original agenda was put forward. So the co-chairman and I decided we would go ahead and allow this to be a discussion brought forward because there are some concerns from our constituents across the state. That being said, we are not going to spend a ton of time on this. This was not directives brought forward to us by Management Council. So with that being said, if you do have questions, I would ask that you take them offline directly to the director. Mr. Director, if you can please go ahead and give us a quick summary of what's going on with the Highway Patrol, specifically related to overtime and the directive that you have issued that is causing a little bit of consternation across the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Little is, yeah, it's fun. I'll take you back to last fall. We got kind of a little bit of a indication that the burn rate on overtime was excessive. They were on a burn rate, not a burn rate. They burned $6 million over in overtime. And so the colonel at the time put out an order that said only authorized and pre-approved overtime would be paid out. At that point, we saw the burn rate was still about 150,000 a month. Flash forward a couple, 3 months, we continue to watch the burn rate. They were on a trajectory to go over $8.5 million. The colonel left at the end of March. I again took another deep dive as I described earlier this morning, and quickly put out an order that we cannot continue down this path if we're going to make it till our fiscal year ends September 30. And so we were not going to end the fiscal in a positive note. We were going to go negative, which is, as you can attest, budget is law. We were going to have a law enforcement agency breaking the law. I had to make some pretty hard decisions. I'm not the most popular individual in the Highway Patrol at this point, but to make us get to the end of the fiscal year, I had to put out an order that basically said no paid overtime, which still allowed them to do their job, but they had to flex that time off or get comp time, which is not financially beneficial to them, but we still have a job to do. The order was very clear. We're not taking calls. We're not at the end of their 40-hour shift. They're not in the middle of a high-speed chase and saying, "I hit my 40, I'm leaving." That's not what the order said, nor was it what was implied. In that order, I also put in there a mileage restriction that said 400 miles per week. And that was not a hard and fast number. It was, again, if we're in the middle of a shift and they're in the middle of a call, "Oh, I hit my 400 miles, I'm done for the week." What we asked them to do is to try to minimize how much they travel. On calls, obviously you have to roll. You probably have seen more highway patrolmen in the medians over the last month than you have in the past. A lot of that is because of that 400-mile restriction. Now, that's a totality of the miles. If I looked at the two budgets, the two things that were killing the budget were overtime burn and mileage burn. And so the only two things that I could do financially to get us to zero come September 30 were to minimize the impact on those two categories. So what we did is we took an average of all the miles and the troopers, divided it. On average, we're spending 635 miles per week. So cutting it by 50%, I was not overly concerned that we were not going to be able to perform our mission. I feel like we can. I've asked a lot of the upper level troopers to also minimize their amount to ensure that those miles could go out to the troopers on the ground that are manning the roads day in and day out. H1, the colonel's car is going to be sitting for the next 6 months. So that's 1,600 miles a week or a month that can go out to the troopers, you know, so that those kinds of things went out. Obviously, I received a lot of phone calls, not necessarily the good ones, right? I quickly realized I did not do a good job as a leader to explain the why. Hindsight, if I could have done something better, I would have sent out an email to my troop, to the Wyoming Highway Patrol, said, this is what's going on. This is why we're doing what we have to do. Not that the pain would be any less, but at least they would have at least understood the position that we're in as a group. And so I had the opportunity to do that about 3 days too late. But getting decent feedback from the troopers that say, all right, we get it. We're in this situation. We as a team need to help ourselves get out of it. So I really want to commend the Highway Patrol and the personnel within the patrol. They get it. They understand the situation. We're going to work towards getting us out of it. Been having conversations. I got a lot of phone calls, like I said, from the sheriffs and some chiefs of police about their budget increasing because they have to take our calls. I want to know when somebody calls a trooper and says, hey, I need you to go out, and they say, no, I can't because of something. I need to know that because that wasn't my order. That wasn't my intention. We have a mission to perform. We'll come August reassess. We're doing weekly budget conversations, by the way. I want to know the burn rate every week to see, you know, what our projections are to get us to September 30. And if we have to make more adjustments, which could be reduction in force, it could be furloughs. Those are the things that I tried really hard when I put out that order. I do not want to lose a trooper. I do not want to decrease their monthly paycheck. That is the last ditch effort to get me to September 30, get us to September 30. But they have to be on the table. That's the hard and honest truth. I think everybody taking the deficit that we're in seriously will get us there without those really drastic impacts. I asked Alan Thompson, the executive director of WASCOP, if I could send him some emails and if he would blast those emails out to the WASCOP membership, and he said, graciously said yes. So I sent the directive. I sent an email to go along with it to explain the why and the position we're in, just so that communication goes out. I was asked to come to the WASCOP conference last week and was able to get up on the stage and at least have this conversation to ensure that they fully know that we are actively engaged in trying to help ourselves get to the end of the biennium while still fulfilling our mission. Had some good conversation with them. Appreciate that opportunity to speak with them. Not everybody's happy about it, but I had I had numerous people call me and reach out and say they appreciated the opportunity for us to speak in front of them and be able to have the good conversation. So, and with that, Mr. Chairman, we are on the street for a replacement colonel. The process itself is a very lengthy process, but either way, even if I could hire a colonel tomorrow, I would not. I will keep that position open till the end of the fiscal year. That will save me a significant amount of dollars that we don't have to spend at this point. I'll add a few more hours to my day to ensure that that's being done adequately. But we have a good team over there, and we're going to fulfill our mission to the best that we can. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate any questions you have. We can sure talk offline. But this definitely is something that we're working on, and I appreciate the opportunity to get it out in front of you.
Committee, as stated, we're going to ask for any questions to be taken offline, but this was something that was asked for, actually, not even by anybody on this particular committee. I received at least a half a dozen phone calls from different representatives and senators across the state from their sheriffs that wanted us to have this conversation, and was asked to please make sure that our sheriffs had an opportunity to address this as well. So Director, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your willingness to have the discussion offline. So with that, I'll bring this up to Wascop and or the sheriffs. Good morning, Sheriff. I'll have you hit the talk button there. Make sure we get you on the mic. You're hot.
Okay. Chairman Committee, so I'm Rod Odenbaum of the Johnson County Sheriff's Office. So I'm here basically to talk about the things Director Westby talked about. I will say kudos to him for coming to Wascop because it's probably not something that he wanted to do. So kudos to him for doing that. So after Director Westby talked, we had a sheriff's meeting. At that time, I was the president of the Sheriff's Association and no longer am. So I kind of got stuck with this at the end. But we got together and we talked about some concerns that across the state with the sheriffs. And one of the concerns, and I'll try to blow through this because Director Westby took care of a lot of the talking points that we had, but the main concern, and I think by the majority of the sheriffs, were the response to the calls or responding to the calls by Highway Patrol, and how is the local agencies, the local sheriff's offices going to take care of that? If they're over their mileage or they're over their overtime, we will still, the sheriff's offices will still respond. And I don't, we just turned in, the majority of the sheriff's offices have probably turned in their budgets already. I didn't adjust mine for anything like that if something goes south. I know Patrol is working towards it, but what do we do until then? Like, how do we cover our overtime? How do we cover our personnel? I'll tell you, in Johnson County, we don't have the personnel to cover. We're given time off. Whether it's overtime or not, we accrue overtime. We'll pay, but the personnel is an issue. I think probably the main message is that when the state, when their budget, something like this happens, it affects all 23 sheriffs in the state, which that's not only our budget, but our relationship with the people that are in our counties. The people that travel on these state highways, whether it's the interstate or it's 16 West going over the mountain, for us, like, we know these people and we're going to respond, whether probably we're asked to or not. And I think that's our duty statutorily, probably. I think if you people would look at the state statute 241101, it establishes the duties for the Highway Patrol. And make no mistake, I believe that we're in this together, that we should work together. If we don't, we're in dire straits. So I'd encourage you to look at that. I'd also like, I don't know if this is the right place to do this, but if we have sheriff's offices keeping track of patrol calls right now. And we have two in the state that one is 25% and one is 28% of taking patrol calls, which that's a lot. I mean, depending on how many calls they go on, but that's a fair amount. I don't know how you fix that. Ours, we have not gained or got any of that data. We started keeping track of that, but we haven't got any so far. So, I guess, I don't have much else. Director Westby covered it all. He did a good job. He's in a tough spot, which puts us in a tough spot. So, the difference is we can't go to the pot for more money. Ours is done. So, I'll close with this, guys. On behalf of the sheriffs, I want to make it clear that the men and the women of the highway patrol, they're every day to working hard. And in many places, they're alongside our deputies. Limiting them really only hurts the local budgets, especially the sheriff's offices. There's only so much we can do with our limited budgets and limited manpower. We are increasingly covering calls and have always been which have always been Highway Patrol's responsibility. Simply because of shortfalls in the state budget or the lack of staff in this largest law enforcement agency. So I guess what I said, I would like that conversation with Director Westby and I mean, we can go over how this is going to all rattle out. I think one of the questions was that how long is this budget issue going to be? And it's September, is that correct? When the new budget comes in. So that was one of the questions. Yeah, and I guess I don't have anything else. Director Westby covered most of it. I tried to answer any of your questions the best I could. So there you go. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you being here, Sheriff. Appreciate the plight that you guys are put in. I'll just say this from the chairman's perspective. We have a serious issue. I appreciate what the director is doing on tightening his belt, not asking for additional funds to cover a shortfall. That being said, that does put a burden back on the people that are doing that mutual aid across the state. So appreciate where you're coming from. I appreciate the concerns. I look forward to hopefully by September when we have our next meeting that there's a kumbaya moment and we all recognize that we made it through this. So Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Sheriff, for the update. So you mentioned two counties had 25 and 28% of their calls were naturally patrol calls. What's the average across 23 counties?
Well, we don't,
Sheriff.
Chairman, Senator Barlow, most haven't gained, like we've just started that process. I don't know that. I think as we get that information, we could forward that through, but as of right now, I don't have
Mr. Chairman, if I
Please
could.
follow up.
Mr. Chairman, did that have a nexus to an interstate, those two counties, or is it somewhere else in the state?
Chairman, Senator Barlow, yes, it had nexus to the interstates.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow up. So I've spent some time along the I-80 corridor in the last couple of weeks. And I heard it in actually several communities about the local resources being used on the interstate and the challenges, particularly with fire and rescue, and those local resources being deployed on the interstate for extrications or whatever they are. Rollins happened to be the most recent one I spoke to, and 50% of their call volume is interstate and that cross the state type movement, not local movement. So anyway, just there's more to this than just the sheriffs and this highway patrol. There's first responders, broader first responder question here too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm just trying to connect a dot here, if I may, because what I heard Director Westby say is that his highway patrolmen on duty are not prohibited in responding to a call. And what I hear from you is that you are now having to respond to calls that the highway patrol is not responding to. And so can you clean that up for me a little bit? Because I'm not understanding why this extra burden is being put on our sheriff's departments to respond to calls when our highway patrol are still able to do that.
Chairman, Representative Larson. So there are times that the highway patrol is out of area or unable to respond. Those, I mean, I could give you a few examples in Johnson County right now, and Director Westby said if there are those concerns, we need to call him. I'll make that call because we definitely do have sometimes, and however the coverage looks, we have patrolmen in Sheridan County. We go to all Johnson counties into KC. So yeah, there are times that they don't respond. So yeah, I'll address that with Director Westby. I appreciate that question.
Representative Geringer?
I'll try to make this quick. Thank you.
No, don't try.
Do.
We're delaying. Sheriff, thank you for being here. Trying to understand a little bit prior to this freeze on overtime and mileage and whatnot. Will you also have data that shows how much you were responding even when we didn't have this freeze on overtime? Were you in fact covering calls and whatnot to some percentage prior to this?
Sheriff?
Chairman, Representative Geringer, yes, we were. Those times too, I think, back when the highway patrol had a hiring issue and the coverage was tight. And so even then we were taking calls. So I don't think that it's not, I don't know that the progression has got up there yet, but I could see that. I mean, all along we've been taking calls for that, and understand, like, we're going to back each other up. That's not an issue. The issue we have is if there's a call and patrol is unable to make it or out of service or whatever that looks like. If it's a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're calling our people out and we're paying overtime. So it's not, I feel like we have to respond. Whether those are local people or not, still people, still got to take care of them. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, it's been kind of a pattern. And I think we wanted to maybe address it because we thought that it would get worse with the guidelines that patrol had set.
Okay. Representative Nicholas, I am going to make this very clear, committee. The rest of these questions need to be taken offline. We still have one more thing to take on our agenda before we break to lunch.
So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. What I think what we need is just some hard data on where it happens, how often it happens, and if volumes or frequencies have changed or modified dramatically. And is this something really, I mean, how critical is it that we have to do something about it to fix a problem, to make sure that we have sufficient coverage everywhere all the time, because that's our goal. And if it's been an ongoing problem, then is it worse now? It may not change after 9:30, depending on what budgets happen and when other things go on, unless we are kept up to date and have hard numbers to support it, to really understand what the crux of the matter is. So I'll be more than just what we're doing today. So I just want to make that directive on, if we can, so we can fix the problem.
Well, I think the bigger thing to call out right here is the sheriff said it in his own words. We brought this forward because we thought this was going to be a bigger problem. I believe that we have already seen the implementation. I'm hoping that it's heard loud and clear through the Highway Patrol's rank and file, that overtime does not mean that our job ends, right? That it's just gone to comp time. And that, so I believe that we've headed this off before it turned into a major problem. I fully respect where the sheriffs were coming from. I do believe that there was probably a miscommunication somewhere along the line as well, of people saying they couldn't respond, and it was making things very difficult on our local law enforcement agencies. Again, I will echo that I hope that by this time in September, when we hear this again, that everything is fine. The 25 to 28% seems to be a pretty standard response issue across the board, and that the director is starting over a new budget with some pretty clear directives on overtime expenditures. So with that, thank you very much, Sheriff. Not going to take any public comment directly on that unless there is public comment on all of this. So we have not had public comment on House Bill 82 or this, so I will open up public comment for both of those. Seeing nobody running, we will close public comment. We already have the committee directive on House Bill 82. Committee, is there any comment or directive, I'm sorry, from the committee on the highway patrol funding? Seeing none, we'll get rid of that directive, and we have nothing there. That takes us to our 11 o'clock with only 6 minutes to spare before being an hour behind schedule. This is our Wasters report from the Wyoming Association of County Engineers and Road Superintendents. Gentlemen, if I can have you come forward. Committee, I'm going to make this very clear. We are not going to be asking any questions on this. These gentlemen have been informed of that. This is informational purposes only. We have been working, co-chairman and I have been working with the County Commissioners Association. We've been hearing a very large discussion on state funding for state roads, but what we have not had is a statewide comprehensive look at our county roads, which also are severely lacking in funding. So with that, gentlemen, I do not have any of your names, so I am just going to say, gentlemen, have you please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Brian Edwards. I'm the county engineer up in Park County. I'm also the president of the Wyoming Association of County Engineers and Road Bridge Superintendents, which most of you know as WACERS. And then I have with me today Gene Legursky, who's the Public Works Director in Sweetwater County. And Gene also serves on the County Road Fund Committee. And then most of you, of course, know Dr. Kaylin Samadi, who's with the University of Wyoming Technology Transfer Center, commonly known as T-Squared or LTAP. As most of you know, Dr. Samadi and his team have worked with counties over the past several years in working on road bridge related issues at the local level, mainly looking at the condition of the county road system and specifically paved roads. And as part of that, in recent years, they've looked at quantifying what those needs are, assigning costs to those needs, and then working with local officials to try to set priorities so that resources can be best allocated to the most pressing needs. So the purpose for us coming in front of the committee today is to update you regarding county road bridge related issues, specifically focused on the county maintained paved roads and the condition of those paved roads. With that said, because we'll mainly be talking about that, we also wanted to continue to emphasize the same story that you're hearing from everybody else. We're continuing in our road bridge departments across the state, seeing drastically increasing costs for labor, materials, and equipment. And that's not a surprise to anyone here. And unfortunately, revenues have remained relatively flat over the last 10 years and are woefully insufficient in many cases to cover basic maintenance needs. So we're seeing that a lot of our membership and WACERS are struggling to keep up with basic maintenance, much less major capital improvement projects or reconstruction projects. So this is an issue that is, that is not going away, and it's only going to get worse if action's not taken. And with that, I'll kick it over to my colleague, Gene.
Thank you, Brian. My name is Gene Legursky. I'm the Sweetwater County Public Works Director. I'm also the
chairman of the County Road Fund Committee, and I serve as the treasurer of Wasters. If I can get the next slide, please. I won't bore you guys with a lot of details. I put this slide up there all the time when I talk about county roads. We are part of the transportation network. We get kind of forgot a little bit. But the one thing I want to say is WYDOT has 7,402 centerline miles of road. They have way higher ADTs. They have way higher truck traffic. However, when you look at the counties, we have 15,100 total miles of road, 2,303 of those being paved roads. Next slide. And I say that because it's not an us versus them issue. It's the same thing that Director Westby has been touting forever. Other transportation commissions and district engineers have been touting in front of you guys forever. It's one of those things that, you know, we are part of the transportation thing, and you guys all represent unique parts of the state. And I want you guys to think of it, especially those that represent part of Sweetwater County. There's 3 of you guys on this. We do not have a mineral extraction company that does not use the county road outside of Simplot. That is all the trona mines, all the coal mines, all the power plants. 90% of the oil and gas have to use a county road to get out to a state highway or federal highway. So all of that traffic for all that extraction that supports the Southwest Wyoming has to come down a county road. Next slide, please. What does that mean? I don't want to read this to you because I know you guys are short on time. But one of the statistics that was thrown out by people that have testified before us is 33% of the national average of roads in the United States are in poor condition. By the PQR that WYDOT does, 90% of the county roads that are paved are in poor condition. That just kind of puts you in perspective of where that is. PQR is one of those things that's hard to exactly realize what 33% of what they are. But if we use a PQR, which WYDOT uses, which is a pavement quality rating, we're at 90% of county roads are in poor conditions. Next slide, please. I know we're supposed to talk about paved roads, but I'd be reminiscent talking about dirt roads, gravel roads. For example, mag chloride, which 50% of the constituents hate, 50% of them love, just depends on if it's on their road and if it rains. Mag chloride is the lifeblood for county roads that aren't paved. It allows us to blade the roads once or twice a year, put mag chloride in there, and forget about them for a little bit. If we do not use mag chloride on our roads, every 6 years, we're reapplying more gravel onto those roads because of the fines that blow away into the dirt. Just in Sweetwater County from 25 to 26, we saw an 18% increase in our mag chloride price. If you look at 24 to 26, that's 25%. That is a huge cost that is just unbearable to keep up. When I started this job 10 years ago, my mag chloride budget was about $620,000. Now it's topping $900,000. Okay, we've cut roads. We've tried to use in every other year. We've tried to use in every 3 year, and that's just where we are. That's the price of where we're at. One of the other main concerns of ours is bridges. Bridges are critical. They're critical infrastructure. WYDOT has a 7% poor rating. The counties, as of our latest study by the bridge department at WYDOT, we're looking at 14 to 16% of county bridges are in poor condition. Now that will increase over the next 3 years and get better because of the bill funding. Every county received 2 free bridges basically from the feds, but those are attacking the very, very worst bridges that we have. One of the bridges that we have of the 2 are in Sweetwater County is closed. Our commission decided to close it for the next 3 years just because there's no way we can fix it and then dump more money into it to reconstruct it. The second road that we have down there is so severely underrated that basically a pickup can go across it. Next slide. I'll skip over this one, but you guys can all read this. If you guys have questions, please reach out to your local road and bridge, Wasters members, stuff like that. But this just kind of goes through what we're seeing as far as road and bridge departments around the county. Next slide. Everybody's seen this. This is how county road and bridge gets funded through state fuel tax. One of the things I'd like to mention, Chairman Brown, is I really liked your comment earlier in the session when you stated that it is interesting how much we choose not to fund our roads. That's one of those things that's hard. I mean, it's a very hard thing because obviously nobody likes taxes. We live in Wyoming for a reason. However, we have critical infrastructure that is vital to our economy that has to be maintained, has to be rebuilt somehow. Most road and bridge departments are funded somehow by the 12 mills that a county receive, and then the majority of it comes from fuel tax. When you actually look at that, it's really critical to be able to leverage money. Down in Sweetwater County, we were fortunate enough to get a Wyoming Energy Authority grant, $1.5 million to reconstruct a 1.5 mile section of county road that goes to the power plant. Without that, we would have to wait another 2.5 years to get enough money to reconstruct that portion of road. It's just one of those vital things. You know, everybody also talks about, hey, what are you guys doing for yourselves? County road funds are very limited. WYDOT does a great job of passing through everything that they can to us. They really do a really good job of helping us out with crushing and other things, and providing road-to-mill tailings on I-80 and other things that we can't do. We cannot do our job without the district engineers, the DCEs, and the state. They provide so much needed just resources for us. One of the things that everybody talks about is flat grants from the federal government. They're very high competitive grants. There's only a handful of them given out through the state every year. It takes about 5 years to get one of those and get them done. So it's a very long-term, very arduous process. The other thing is safe routes to schools. And we talk about the BROS program a lot. One of the bridge engineers that was up at our recent conference that T2 held, the BROS program is actually full up, expended all the money through 2033. What that stands for, BROS, is bridges off system. Those are for county bridges that are not in an urban setting and not on an arterial or collector road. So you can imagine having a bridge that gets derated a little bit, and we're 2026 right now, you can't even get that into the place until 2034. So that's what we're looking at with that. Next slide, please. So this is Park County's actually revenue. This is from their fuel tax. As you can see, the last 15 years, it's pretty much flat. What this is really doing for our Wasters members is it's having them put off preventative maintenance. Smaller counties are kicking their chip seals off on their roads from 7 to 10 years. And what that's not allowing us to do is to keep good roads good. Caleb actually will have a slide that is very, very important that WYDOT uses, everybody uses that's in the asphalt industry. If you get to a road that's good, you can maintain it as good for a longer time. Once you kind of hit that curve of no return, you're talking about reconstructions and stuff like that, where that's very, very money intensive. It's very, very labor intensive and time intensive. And, you know, after going through a couple reconstructions here where we're spending $2 million a mile on a road, I can do a lot of crack sealing and a lot of chip seal for $2 million. I can cover about 80 miles of road for that. So we can keep our good roads good if we have the money and we have a continued resource. Long-term, next slide, please. Long-term, what Wasters members would like to see is just additional long-term countable funding streams. And I don't know how to do that. Honestly, I've listened to you guys throw away a lot of good ideas, and you guys are getting an inter-committee together to do that. But one of the things is that we can't forget is we can't overwhelm the system. One of the things with counties is most of the counties, over half, do not have county engineers on staff. And those that do are like myself. We have 2 engineers. We handle 1,400 miles of road, bridges, 3,000 culverts, you name it. We're up there. We're doing the day-to-day stuff. So when we get money and we get it in an influx, it has to be done in such a way that the engineering firms around the state, the construction firms around the state can plan and ramp up for this. One of the worst things that we can do, and I've seen it when I worked construction in a previous life up here in Casper, is you get a lot of money dumped into the system and it goes away and it vanishes out of state. We want that money turning over in the state as much as we can. So long-term, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, consistent funding stream to let the local firms, the local construction companies be able to staff up, to be able to train their staff, and to be able to attack these situations in real time. So with that, I know I didn't catch you guys up that much. Try to attack as fast as I can, which for me is, I can go faster, but most people can't understand what I'm saying. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Dr. Sabati.
Thank you, Mr. Legursky.
Right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Caleb Sabati. My friends address me as Dr. K. And I've been working with these guys for the past 35 years or so to address their needs. If you look at the slide on the screen, paved roads are everywhere in every county. Like Park County has more than 250 miles of paved roadways. Sweetwater County has more than 150 miles of paved roadways, and they're really genius if you consider the amount of funding, the limited amount of funding they have, and how they can manage such a big network with limited resources. It's really incredible. The total number of paved county roads is about 2,300 miles of paved county roads. And these paved county roads receive very little amount of funding. Next slides, please. Now, as you can see on the screen, what we do, we developed a program where we determine the condition of those 2,300 miles of roadways. So every other year, we do half of the state due to the limited funding that we have. And you can see on the screen, we started this program back in 2014. Now, with the data that we collect similar data that YDOT is collecting on the state highway system so that you can compare the condition of the county roads, county paved roads to the state highway system. Next slide, please. Now, as you can see on this interesting slide, next slide. Yeah, you can see on this slide here, when it comes to cracking, most of the county paved roads are in poor conditions. Most of them are above the minimum acceptable condition. If you look at the IRI, which is the roughness, again, you see lots of county roads, are above, and most of the counties in the state are above the accepted line. Next slide, please. Now, Jean mentioned the PQR. This is how YDOT determined the condition of their paved roadways. And you can see all 23 counties in the state, their PQR is below the acceptable level. Now, the only thing that is good with the county roads would be the rutting because they have less heavy roadways. They're all in the acceptable level. Next slide, please. As you can see here, we've been working at the T2 Center with the Wacers Group so that we can identify the needs, put a dollar figure, to figure out how much it costs to maintain those important county roadways. So we received a one-time funding from federal source so that we can do the study. Next slide, please. You can see here that 35% of those county roads are in poor or very poor conditions when it comes to cracking, 75% in poor or very poor conditions when it comes to roughness, and almost all of them are in very poor conditions when it comes to the PQR. So now the question is, next slide, please. The question is, how can we determine, put a dollar figure on the needs of those county paved roadways? And this is the study that we have done in the very first time in the state. And I'm really proud to work with our partners in the counties. We did lots of analysis. We collected data from all the counties on the cost that which would take to do each type of maintenance. And as you can see in this slide, we came up with the 5 Rs, similar to what YDOT is doing. And we averaged the cost for the 23 counties to do each level of treatments. And these are the costs that we were able to come up with. Next slide, please. And also, for the first time in the state, we were able to come up with a decision tree to fix all of these different roadways based on actual conditions. And this is what YDOT is utilizing. They have their own very effective decision trees to figure out the most effective, cost-effective treatment for each segment in the state. And again, we developed this by working closely with our partners in all 23 counties. Next slide, please. Now, you can see based on the east and the west side of the state, you can see the cracking conditions. Different counties have different cracking conditions. It was interesting to see on the eastern side, we have more cracking problems than the western side of the state, but each county has different needs when it comes to fixing their roadways. Next slide, please. Same thing when it comes to the overall PQR. Again, you would see some counties are in the little in the green and the red, etc. So each county has different kind of conditions and they need to address differently. But in this study, we were able to figure out all of these different needs and put all of these different needs in one request. Next slide, please. Now you can see here, these are the different Rs. You know, some sections would need just, as Jean mentioned, maybe just to add some chip seal. Other sections need overlay. Other sections might need some complete reconstruction. And you can see in this slide, you know, the different costs or the different needs for the different treatments. And we were able to identify this, you know, for all sections in the state. To make a long, next slides, please. To make a long story short, if we want to address every single need for every paved county road in the state, we're going to need around $1 billion statewide. Next slide, please. Now, on this slide, then, what we did, we tried to figure out, we keep, the counties don't have any funding, you know, to take care of any of these needs. So what would happen if we keep dragging our feet and we do not apply any treatment to any of those segments? The annual additional cost is going to be around $94 million. So by dragging our feet and not maintaining those roadways, every year we're adding up to the pile. It's not going to get any cheaper in the future. It's just going to cost us more money so that we can maintain those roadways to the acceptable level in the future. Next slide, please. Now, as you can see in this slide, this is the $94 million. So it's not going to get any better if we drag our feet and we do not, you know, figure out a pot of money to fix all of these different roadways. Next slide, please. Now, on this slide, this is a very important slide, and YDOT utilizes this slide very effectively. It costs us, you know, significantly less money to maintain roadways in a good shape. And that's what YDOT does very skillfully. So they go out, and when the roadways are really in a good shape, they spend money on them to keep them in good shape. They do the chip seal, they do the sealing the cracks, they patch the hole, you know, the potholes. They do this so skillfully, and that's why our highway system, you know, which is maintained by YDOT, is in such a reasonable and good kind of shape. For us at the county level, we're really ignoring all of this. We're not spending enough money on the roadways to maintain them. So if you're fixing the roof of your house, if it is just, you know, in a little bad shape, you ignore it. Later on, there's a hole in it. And then that hole is going to translate in lots of water getting into your house. And all of a sudden, your bill is going to be so high. And that's unfortunately what we're doing with our county roadways. We're ignoring the needs early on, and it's just going to cost us a lot more money later on. So it's better and it's more cost effective to provide some funding so that early on we can maintain those roadways, and then they can stay in a better shape at a lower cost for a longer period of time. Next slide, please. Now here it costs, you know, we're coming up with all kinds of analysis to show how if we spend 10% of the needs, you know, how we can enhance the quality of our county roadways, or 20% or 30%. So this is just part of the minimum, you know, some of the analysis that we did to show how by investing in our county roads, how we can enhance the quality over time. Next slide, please. And then after talking to the county commission associations, discussing this with the Wasters group members, they felt like we really need to start investing. And a starting point would be maybe $500 million over 5 years, if this is possible, or even something less than this, whatever is appropriate. But this would help the counties at least in taking the first step in the right direction. What I want to say, you know, the take-home message today is, we have lots of infrastructure in the state. And YDOT is taking care of our interstate system, our primary roads, secondary roads in a very good way. And these roads are extremely important for mobility. So if a person wants to go from Casper to Cody or Casper, go down to Cheyenne, they really need to get on the interstate system and the secondary road, primary roads for mobility. But once they get closer to their destination, they are going to be using those local paved roads that I told you about, those county paved roadways. Nobody can get to his or her destination without using those county paved roadways. And normally, most of the crashes or a fair amount of crashes that would take place when people are making their trips, those crashes would take place in the final 10 or 15 minutes of getting to the destinations. And this is the time when our Wyoming residents are using our county paved roadways. So it makes sense, nobody here is asking for funding to be taken away from YDOT because YDOT is fulfilling their mission, for mobility. And I think the counties are they need to fulfill their mission so that for land access, so that the Wyoming residents can make it to their destination safely. In addition to this, so that our industrial partners can get to the drilling fields, the ranchers can move their products around the state, and they all use those county paved roadways so that they can fulfill their mission. Thank you for giving me the time to listen to my presentation.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. I think as you guys have been sitting here and you guys have watched, I know we've seen you guys here before. The topic of where you guys are at is something that we're all understanding and appreciate the detailed input that you guys have given us here. Appreciate the County Commissioners Association bringing this to our to a discussion, something for the committee to consider as we move forward in the future. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
All right, committee, we'll take public comment on that. Is there any public comment on the Wacers review? Seeing none. Okay. I want to gauge your interest on whether we take the next one. I have asked the director whether or not we can get this done in about 5 minutes. Do that before we head to lunch or after lunch? Okay. All right. Director, if you want to bring Sean forward. All right. Good morning, Sean. If you can please introduce yourself to the committee, and the floor is yours when you are ready, sir.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and the members of the committee. My name is Sean Burke. I'm the Aeronautics Administrator for the Wyoming Department of Transportation. I'll make this really quick. So just kind of a quick status on the state aircraft. So last budget session, we did get a budget authority reduction of $685,294 to what is basically the one of the operating accounts for the state transport aircraft. Long story short, I think we're kind of still assessing what the implications might be in the future biennium for the impacts of the operations of that. Ultimately, I think there's going to be some level of reduction in the availability of the aircraft. What that'll probably look like is YDOT and the governor and other state agencies each use the aircraft about a third of the total hours. The overall availability of the aircraft for other state agencies will probably be reduced over that time. In that account, we bill the variables such as jet fuel. So jet fuel, much like diesel, has gone up a fair bit. So that's probably where we'll see the majority of the reduction. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think that's encapsulates it pretty quickly.
Pretty clear, pretty straight to the point. Committee, is there any discussion on the state planes and the budget reduction and what they're planning on doing with that? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll see if there is any public comment on that one. Every once in a while, we have somebody who wants to talk about the state planes. Seeing none. Nobody online. Okay. Committee, any directives on that one? Seeing none. All right. Well, that puts us at, yes.
Just before we go to lunch, I just want to thank the engineers for showing up and giving the presentation. And frankly, we need you. You want, meaning every county, is to educate, so that we have legislators actually pay attention and help get a fuel tax passed, because that's the primary key to your funding, and so that's what we need. So that's my recommendation to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will echo, thank you guys again for being here. I do appreciate you guys whipping through the presentation. I know you guys could have spent a lot more time on that, so appreciate you guys doing that, and appreciate County Commissioners Association for bringing it forward. With that, committee, we will take an hour and 8-minute lunch, being superbly generous there with that. So we will be back here at 1:30, and we will pick up our GIS discussion from there.